down to a significant level, probably already left over the summer. And the recent strategy update, obviously they got out of the prime brokerage business, but it wasn't as dramatic as some had feared. So I think, a lot of people who did leave, left in those summer months when there was still a lot of uncertainty floating about, both in terms of the bank's direction and the year-end pay figures as well. So I think there's a little more certainty around the franchise and the potential upside there.
Michael, thank you very much indeed for updating us. Bloomberg's Michael Moore on what is happening at Credit Suisse. Another set of companies we're watching carefully, Unilever and Glaxo. Unilever making a bid for Glaxo's consumer health unit. The analyst community very, very much against this. Joining us now, Joe Easton. Joe, talk us through the deal that is being proposed here.
Right, so it's for the GSK consumer health unit, and it is at the moment estimated to be around £50 billion, which is what was offered. There was 3 offers given to the company, and Glaxo wasn't happy with any of them. So the worry really among analysts is that Unilever will keep coming back, and some are saying they may even have to add another £10 billion onto it, which would take it to £60 billion. Then we're getting into really high multiples in terms of the valuation for the unit. It could even go up to as much as 25 times profit, which is a lot higher than a lot of peers trade in that sector. So we can see why almost every analyst has criticised this deal news today.
Why does Unilever want it so much? If it was prepared to pay that kind of money, it obviously sees something that maybe the analyst community doesn't. Or is it merely a reflection of the fact that the rest of the portfolio is actually even lower growth than this portfolio?
Yeah, I think that probably is another big worry, is that if they're willing to pay so much money for a pretty low growth business in consumer health, how bad is the growth in the current unit and how worried are they about that? So that's something we've been hearing a lot of people talk about today. And also, obviously, the synergy element that you mentioned earlier in your intro. Analysts are questioning, where is the synergies? It's kind of company that makes pot noodles and mayonnaise versus essentially drug products. Although they are consumer, it's still, they are drug products. They're painkillers. They're stuff that you need drug production in. So, there's a whole raft of worries really among analysts today, and that's why we've seen the stock drop so much, I think.
What is Unilever's track record when it comes to integrating large businesses, to making these kinds of shifts?
I think, to be fair to them, they usually do reasonably well. But again, a lot of the businesses they've taken on have been in the food area, and that's really come back to bite them because the growth has just stagnated, even in the emerging market areas where there is growth in consumer health. There isn't the growth in the food products business. So it's probably trying to make up for some of those kind of past sins in businesses that haven't grown as well and gone to the slightly higher growth consumer health business, which has gotten a bit of a boost during the pandemic with people just generally more concerned about health and people that expect that trend to continue even as the pandemic fades. So generally, I think they've done pretty well, but probably trying to make up for some of those not so good deals with this one.
Joe, even before this bid emerged, there was lots of criticism of management at Unilever. Terry Smith, the well-known fund manager, talking about the fact that this business had lost its way, that it wasn't focusing on maximizing shareholder returns. Activists are watching the business. I'm wondering whether there is any pressure here, if this deal doesn't come off, to shift management, to shift strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they're kind of putting all their eggs in one basket in a way in terms of this strategy. I mean, they've obviously announced this attempted deal. They probably very well knew that it would be negatively received. It'd be unlikely that they didn't do their research and speak to people before they got involved in it. Obviously, it was reported in the press before they announced it, but I'm sure they knew what they were getting themselves into. And then today, they've also announced this essentially a strategy update saying we're going to sell off all these older food businesses that we know investors aren't happy with. We're going to move away from that. Don't worry, this will be a transformative time for the company. So if this doesn't work out, then it's very difficult to see how investors would continue to back the leadership. But we'd like to see them given some time and see how that pans out before we make any judgments there.
We'll watch carefully. Joe, thank you very much indeed. Bloomberg's Joe Easton updating us on the Unilever GSK story. Let's wrap things up. European stocks are done for the day. We're through the settlement. A little bit of a tick higher during the auction, but still not quite at session highs as we've come through the end of the day here in Europe. I think it's going to be a really interesting start to trading tomorrow as we watch what is happening in the United States. Close for today. Volume in Europe, though, not been too bad. Let's talk about what we're going to be discussing next. Eastman Chemical is going to invest $1 billion to build the world's largest molecular plastics recycling facility. It's going to be built in France. We're going to talk to the CEO, Mark Costa, next. This is Bloomberg.
You mentioned the 1.5 million tests. That's quite a feat. At the same time, I've seen estimates that say that'll get you through about a week or so. What do you do after that?
Let's be smart with our resources. Why not use the tests strategically when you need them? How are we using them? A child is diagnosed with COVID in a classroom. We give that entire classroom take-home test kits so their parents can test them, so we can determine if we should close down the school or just the classroom, or what we should do with that particular facility area. What has happened in the past, you had one diagnosis, we want to close the entire school. That just makes no sense. Instead of using our resources in a strategic fashion, the science has shown just because one child has COVID in the classroom, it doesn't mean the entire school or the classroom is infected. We're going to be smarter, and we're going to pivot, and most importantly, we're going to defeat COVID.
Big effort to have more African Americans and more women on boards, but do you think that will last?
I believe that we are seeing a real paradigm shift where we understand that diversity in the boardroom is more than one.
Mercedes-Benz is on a path towards CO2 neutral mobility. So we have flicked the switch there, and really we're going to step by step electrify everything. And what does that mean? Combustion engines get electrified.
Let's check in on the Bloomberg First Word News. I'm Laura Wright. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces another bruising week with his political future in the balance. 6 lawmakers in his own Conservative Party have called on Johnson to resign over allegations of drinks parties in Downing Street while the country was locked down. Meanwhile, British media report that Johnson is planning staff changes and a series of populist policy announcements. Moderna is moving closer to having a vaccine designed specifically for the Omicron variant. The company's CEO says clinical development for the shot will begin soon.
What we're doing, and we started this the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the day we saw the sequence, is developing an Omicron-specific vaccine. That vaccine is being finished to be made. It should be in the clinic in the coming weeks.
Bonsell spoke at a virtual World Economic Forum event on the pandemic. The discussion was moderated by Bloomberg's Francine Lacqua. In China, the central bank has cut a key interest rate for the first time in almost 2 years. Beijing is trying to bolster an economy that's lost momentum because of a property slump and repeated coronavirus outbreaks. Official data showed that China's gross domestic product rose 4% last quarter from a year earlier. That's the weakest since early 2020. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Laura Wright. This is Bloomberg Guy.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. Eastman Chemical will invest up to $1 billion to build the world's biggest molecular plastics recycling facility. It's going to do so in France. The plant will start operations, we think, in 2025. Joining us now from Paris is the company's CEO, Mark Costa. Mark, thank you very much indeed for your time today. I'm really fascinated to find out what you're up to. Let's start with the chemistry here, and then maybe we'll move on to the economics. What exactly are you going to be doing? Many plastics are very hard to recycle. What are you going to be doing here, and how are you going to make it work?
Well, good evening, Guy, and it's great to be here and talk about this investment. We're incredibly excited. When you think about the world and where we're headed today and Eastman's focus of innovations on sustainable materials, and key to that challenge, when you think about it, we think of it as the triple challenge. There's improving climate, there's addressing the plastic waste crisis, and at the same time, improving the quality of life for a growing population around the world. And our circular technology sort of focuses on how to do all three at the same time. We are sort of the world leaders in polyester as well as a cellulosic biopolymer, and this investment is focused on our long history in polyester. Obviously today there's a tremendous amount of plastic waste, which is a waste of resources and obviously having a bad impact on the environment and needless impact on the climate. So our technology, which we call methanolysis, basically takes that polyester waste, whether it's plastic waste from packaging that cannot be mechanically recycled easily, or carpet fiber or textiles, and unzips that polyester back into its building blocks, then purifies it, and then we can remake that same exact polymer that we make today with the same quality, and we do it at a much lower carbon footprint. So we get rid of the waste, and with the plant that we intend to build in France, we will have an 80% lower carbon footprint than the traditional fossil feedstock. So a really compelling complement to the current recycling to deal with all this waste that ends up being incinerated, often here in Europe, or landfill off in the US, or downcycled into sort of low-end applications instead of really closing the loop where we can really replace fossil fuels with waste plastic as feedstock.
So this is like for like, which is fantastic. Why France?
Well, France was an excellent opportunity for us for really three factors. The first was the government was highly engaged. President Macron has set out a bold vision for the country and around addressing climate and its impact, of course, but also plastic and the circular economy is a big part of its platform. And so all of his ministries came together as an integrated team and worked incredibly well for us to see the opportunity to invest here and support us on all the elements of this project that we needed. The second factor, of course, is France is filled with very strong French brands that have been very engaged with us and committed to working with us around this project. Companies like LVMH, L'Oreal, Clarins, global brands as well, of course, Estée Lauder, P&G. So tremendous customer engagement where these companies have very strong commitment to be leaders, not just in France and in Europe, but in the globe on achieving very aggressive circular targets and climate targets. So working with these brands, building this plant to sort of support them in their backyard, if you will, was very attractive. And of course, France, being a large country in Europe, has substantial feedstock on plastic waste that we could use. And the infrastructure commitments the government's made to rebuild and enhance that infrastructure has been very attractive to us.
You talk about the feedstock. Is this something that is going to be limiting? How easy is it to get the supply chain around what you're doing up and running?
Yeah, so the feedstock is one of the more interesting challenges. We have all this plastic waste, a vast amount of it in here, Europe, across the world. But the recycling infrastructure isn't as developed as it needs to be to prevent it from getting, into landfill or into incineration, or even worse, into the environment. So there's a lot of collaboration that's necessary at the governmental level, at the local level, and many companies that manage that waste that we've been working with to be suppliers to us. And we're seeing great engagement on that to sort of really access what we call hard to recycle polyester that really can't be easily used. Today, mechanical recycling is really focused on clear bottles that can be easily cleaned and chopped up and reused. But the rest of the plastic that doesn't meet that very narrow criteria is hard to reuse and ends up, in these other, waste streams. And we can take all of that from packaging. We can take carpet fiber. We can take textiles that are polyester and use all of that as feedstock for us. And that really gives us a way to address a lot of waste, because it's not just packaging. Textiles is another very significant waste stream that needs to be recycled and reused.
Mark, it sounds fantastic. We wish you well. These are the kinds of steps that we really need. Mark Costa, Eastman Chemicals CEO. Sir, thank you very much indeed for your time. This is Bloomberg.
There are a lot of EVs coming to market, and I'm wondering, do you think that just the market share explodes and there's room for everybody, or is there a specific market that you're going after right now?
At Vingroup and VinFast is the same way. We're building premium quality products for mass market, and we do expect that there's an irreversible trend to move from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. So yes, the market share would expand.
How much money do you think you're going to have to sort of pump into everything right now? You also mentioned, this is an announcement from last year, that you're going to start a factory here in the U.S. Where are you in that? What kind of money are you looking to have to deploy?
So far, VinFast has put in about $6 billion so far into VinFast, and we plan to have a few more $1 billion investment.
BSO Now is your online home for weekly Boston Symphony Orchestra and Boston Pops performances. See new concerts that go behind the scenes, plus acclaimed archival concerts. Visit bso.org/now, where the music plays on. BSO season sponsor, Bank of America.
This is a market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
A cool shot. I just wanted to show this to you. This is a live shot of the city of London. Still some lights on, which has got to be a good sign. The skyline, really, I think, enhanced by the full moon sitting right over the top of it. Evening here in London. We are looking ahead to what is going to be happening tomorrow, certainly as Wall Street returns after the holiday. Some of the biggest names still reporting over the next few days. We had lots of banks Friday, but we're not done yet. Tomorrow we get Goldman Sachs. Wednesday, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, some really big names that you're going to want to pay attention to in terms of the details that we're going to get. We've already had Fargo, we've already had JP Morgan. That was interesting, wasn't it? Citi as well. But Goldman Sachs tomorrow, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley coming up on the 19th. In terms of the markets here in Europe, a solid start to the week. European equities on the front foot, as you can see, up by 0.7%. But it's that second line that I think you want to pay attention to. US bond futures dipping, an indication perhaps that we could see yields rising, but circa 1.8 as of Friday. Euro dollar flirting with 114, 114.08. But Brent crude steadily climbing throughout today, 86.40 now, up another 0.4%. I hope you enjoyed the holiday stateside. We'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
almost the end of the year, but Bali is still quiet and empty. I am here in Kuta Legian, one of the main walking streets here that is used to be a tourist spot for beach, dining, shopping, but many shops here are still closed. Most of the outlets are either for rent or for sale as they have run out of business.
Saya kerjanya di sini udah lama, udah ada 10 tahunan di sini kerja. Masih sepi sih, nggak kayak dulu. Kalau dulu kan rame, sekarang ya ada, 1-2 itu ada. Tapi nggak kayak dulu, kalau dulu rame sekali. Sekarang paling dapat jualan ya 100, 120 gitu, 200 ya. Kalau dulu sih ya nyampe dah 1 juta, 1,5 tuh nyampe dapat jualan. Bisa sampai 2 juta dulu. Sekarang nggak pernah lagi dapat segitu. Lama aja. Belum ada turis ke Bali. Masih ya domestik aja.
While Bali has reopened its borders for foreign tourists since October, they're still not coming in. Many international airlines are yet to reinstate their direct flight to the island. Balinese people here really hope they can see more people from Australia, China, and Europe to come visit next year.
Right now, about half of U.S. households invest. We'd like to get that number up to 95+%. Investing should be as ubiquitous as shopping online. It should just be something that people do.
I think that it's hard to put your head around any narrative. Let's just be honest. We've had sort of a shift in, are we in some sort of stagflation fears moment? People were talking about that all day yesterday.
Managed to capture the fashion and business worlds like the British handbag designer Anya Heinmarch. She's won fans around the world with her range of luxury bags, turning her label into a fashion powerhouse.
It's really fun starting a business and fun growing a business. I feel it's a real privilege. And I started my business officially at 18, but I think I knew I wanted to do it very differently from about 15.
But Hindmarch has also become known for her stance on sustainability, working to eliminate single-use plastics before it became a global focus and seeking sustainability in her designs.
I'm quite scared. Oh, I'm very scared by this climate situation. We only look at this last summer and look at the flash floods and the fires and the heat waves. Imagine if that was a monthly situation. And I think that, we all have to change our behavior.
In this episode of Leaders with Lacqua, we talk to Anja Hindmarch about building her brand, making luxury more green, and the challenges of leading a company through the pandemic. Anja Hindmarch, thank you so much for speaking to me on Leaders with Lacqua.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Anja, you're one of the most fascinating entrepreneurs because you also started really young. What did you learn? Did you always think that you'd be an entrepreneur?
Probably, yes. I think, which is a bit sad,
From
isn't it?
age, what, 5?
Well, maybe, I'm not sure. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, so even though I probably can spell the word and still can't occasionally, it's sort of in my blood. But it's really fun starting a business. And fun growing a business. I feel it's a real privilege. And I started my business officially at 18, but I think I knew I wanted to do it very differently from about 15. But I'm sure it's, if you're surrounded by it, it feels very natural. So yes, it's fun.
And it started how? You started by you went to Florence. It was in Italy, and you started handbags.
Yeah, so I knew I was actually given a handbag by my mother when I was about 16, one of her old handbags, and I remember how it made me feel, and I think fashion is fascinating for the mood-changing, the confidence-boosting aspects, so the sort of tribal aspects of what fashion does. And so I went at 18 to Florence, knowing that was the home of leather goods, which is what interested me. I just wanted to learn, actually, and be surrounded by craftsmen who, making things is important, and that's going to be very interesting, I think, over the next sort of 10 years. I think the onshoring of craft and manufacturing is going to be fascinating, actually. I watched the offshoring. I literally saw it, and I think we're going to be seeing that coming back to local. We have to. When we're all looking at our objectives in terms of carbon, proximity is going to be key. So,
will that be inflationary? Without sounding too businessy, but if you bring back, then this is supply chains moving.
Yeah, right? It's huge. I think that it's it's going to be quite significant. We watched it happen, and it's going to possibly reverse. Who knows? Maybe there'll be some amazing technological discovery that allows us to move things around that doesn't harm the environment. But I think naturally we will look to closer supply chains. There will be a cost to that, probably, and so there is going to be this aspect we were saying earlier of buy less, buy better. And that's going to be very interesting, actually. And those countries that have preserved craft and manufacturing are going to suddenly be in the driving seat.
So, Anja, talk to me from that day where you said, right, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to go to Florence and learn more about leather goods. You've had, immense growth, also challenges along the way. What was the most challenging?
Well, I think, growing a business is like a game of chess, isn't it? It's the most fun. I love every second of it. Navigating investment and sometimes, actually, I think one of the things that was challenging for me is actually I was always CEO and creative, and I split my role I moved to creative and brought in a CEO, and I had, some brilliant people. But actually, I think losing the founder in that role often can be quite challenging for a business. And I think one of the things I've learned often, it's not always, because it absolutely can work, but I think often actually growing underneath that sort of natural succession planning. So there's quite a lot to learn on growing a business and not tripping over. But I think ultimately, if you're passionate about product and you're really hardworking, because it's really hard and it's a life commitment. This is not a job.
Are you not working?
No, I'm always working, but I love it.
But you love it. What is there anything that you hate about your job?
No, not really. Actually, listen, all the normal things. But no, I love what I do. Every day feels like a lucky dip. You're never quite sure what's going to come into the inbox.
What's your best piece of advice that you've ever gotten? I think your father was a mentor.
Yes, still is.
Himself was like an entrepreneur.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of his best bit of advices, which would be the one that I would pass on, would be actually, if you just keep going, if you just don't give up, then you succeed. It's not often about succeeding. It's about just not succeeding, not failing in a way. So I think that's a good bit of advice. Also, things come of things. If you do things, things happen. And so yes, lots of things that have helped me. Sort of, it's so often you're hitting a brick wall and you've got to find a way round it, through it, or over it. Ultimately.
But who do you confide into? So is it always, as chief executive and founder, is it always at the end of the day what your gut tells you?
I think gut's really important, actually, and I've learnt actually a couple of times the hard way by not listening to my gut, actually. Sometimes you sort of feel you should be, you know, listening to some other advice, but actually I think gut is a very good, a very important one.
For expansion?
Like for everything, actually. I think hiring, I mean, it's all about people, ultimately. I mean, ultimately business is successful, I think, through people and your team and the loyalty to your team and their loyalty to you and that tightness, that the health of your sort of senior management team, I think is sort of, as in the health of the relationships, is probably the single most important thing. And interestingly, I think it's often the thing that has no value on a balance sheet. And actually, if you were to, I think, do all the sort of due diligence on a company, almost the most important thing would be to actually take the senior leadership team out to dinner and assess how, you know, how happy they are to joke and jibe and have a laugh. I think that's incredibly important, and I feel very lucky in that I have a great team I work with.
I mean, you've also been always very generous with your time. You were UK Trade Ambassador. You do a lot of stuff for, you know, diversity and promotion, inclusion, the British Fashion Council. I mean, is this an idea of you have to give back, or do you just enjoy imparting wisdom?
I think it's that you know, it's really nice to give back. I've been so lucky to receive so much great advice from so many, and it's also that I find it fascinating. I've learned so much through those roles or those institutions, and really just seeing how really great people behave. You know, even down to how they receive a cup of tea from someone, you know, in a big board meeting, and the manners and all the sort of real sort of learnings that you get from seeing a really great chairman chairing a meeting in a really beautiful way. So it's very much a two-way street, but it is lovely to you know, various organisations I've been involved with certainly in the UK, and it's lovely to also get involved and give back where I can.
You're very creative. I remember the hearts that were sparked all around London. There's the Anya Village with, you know, the greengrocers, I think the cafe, and also the hairdresser. Like, where'd you get this inspiration?
Well, I think creativity is important to me. It's part of what my brand is. And I think that it's interesting, the village was the idea of actually, rather than having stalls all over the world, actually going local, it's that local thing again, and bringing the creativity to an experience. I think retail absolutely has a place in this digital world, but there needs to be a reason to visit. And the village is a group of stores in Knightsbridge in Chelsea, based around my very, very first store. So it's like going back to my roots. We have a little cafe there. We have 6 little stores. And actually, I think it's so lovely to meet. I'm there the whole time. Unlike the stores I had all around the world when I wasn't able to visit, didn't know the team so well. So it feels more authentic. And it's a lovely place to kind of meet my customers and to use as a platform to talk about the things that I care about.
I mean, it kind of goes back to this idea of local, of more sustainable, of not necessarily downsizing, but being more, I guess, more down to earth.
Well, it's funny, down to earth is important to me, but I think it's in my whole career has been to the backdrop of that word globalization, global. And I, you know, I watched it and I did it. And now I have this magnet, actually, to have localization. It really feels like we're changing. And so therefore I'm sort of bringing it back, and it just felt completely right to strip it right back and to go back to where I started and to really engage and to communicate. And it's become this lovely little area where we have all these fun ideas and people really get engaged.
Up next, Anya Heinmarch started focusing on sustainability long before it became fashionable. Her views on how retail needs to change and what motivates her to be green.
I think it's very hard to imagine anything being very luxurious in fashion if it's doing harm. So for me, it's I suppose it's my happy place. It's what I'm interested in and feel I should do.
This week, how hydrogen can transform our energy usage. We'll look at why the universe's most abundant element could be a game changer in the climate revolution.
We don't need the laws of physics to change to be able to use hydrogen on our planes.
From iron ore to green hydrogen, one of Australia's richest men tells us about his pivot to sustainable energy.
Let's take action. It's practical, it's implementable. Let's do it now.
Plus, the hydrogen revolution. We'll speak with the CEO of Italian utilities firm Snam about his new book and how green hydrogen could be competitive within 5 years.
Costs are coming down and people are waking up to the fact that it's the only way to decarbonize certain sectors.
I'm Kaylee Lyons from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, and don't miss this week's edition of Bloomberg Green, airing on Friday on Quick Take and over the weekend on TV and online.
Hindmarch has turned her fashion accessories brand into a global name after starting the company as a teenager. But she's also become known for her stance on sustainability, working with supermarkets to eliminate single-use plastics and pushing to create greener products. We discuss how it all started.
Talk to me a little bit about sustainability. It permeates through most of your designs. And 15 years ago, you started with a canvas bag that was called I'm Not a Plastic Bag.
Yes, it has. It's snaked its way through my life, actually. It's a sort of very welcome stranger in many ways. Well, it started back in 2007 when we were approached, actually, to talk about a book that was trying to encourage people not to use single-use plastic. And it was a bit of an aha moment for me in the sense that I think I was struggling with how to make a difference and how to affect change in my own life and in my business whilst hearing this word environment, and just didn't know what to do about it. And I felt I could use the platform of fashion to communicate a sort of change in behavior. And fashion's brilliant like that. Fashion has an amazing sort of purpose in the sense that it really can change the way people behave and dress and look. So that was the project called I Am Not a Plastic Bag. Which went mad. It was a simple.
Sold out in what? 2 hours?
80,000 people queued in one day, to give you a sense, and it rolled on around the world. I mean, 30 people went to hospital in Taiwan. Of course, I'm not at all proud of that, and we halted at that point. But the point is, we had the aim of awareness, and awareness we got. But it made a difference to the project. So prior to the project, I think the UK British Retail Consortium said something like 10.6 billion bags we used in a year, and I think it was reduced to about 6. So it really did make a difference, which was exciting. And then legislation came in and so on. So yes, that was Project A. I think every line in my face is to do with that project. But Project B was really back in 2020, that lovely year we've all just shared.
A very easy year. Nothing happened in 2020 apart from a pandemic.
Yeah, walk in the park, yeah. And I felt I wanted to revisit the subject because actually the problem was still there. I mean, I think there's 8 billion tons of plastic on the planet at any one point. So we brought out a bag called I Am a Plastic Bag, which was 2 years in the making, which was incorporating recycled PET plastic bottles, but actually the aim was to make a very luxurious, beautiful product out of plastic that would have been destined for landfill. The only problem is it was so luxurious and beautiful, it actually behaved like the beautiful cotton drill that we set out to replicate. And so we managed to find a way to coat it in the plastic, the film that's between the windscreens on cars. So, I mean, R&D-wise, it was quite complicated, but it was a good project.
Anya, is this to raise awareness so that you also get people talking about it? As you say, fashion has an immense power of changing behavior and what people want.
Yes, absolutely, it's about awareness. It's also, in the case of the bag, it's saving plastic from landfills. I mean, it's just a very direct response. But I hope it also prompts, just people to stop and think and discuss. In fact, when we launched that project, we actually closed all of our stores for Fashion Week, and we filled them with 90,000 used plastic bottles, which is probably why I got COVID, actually, thinking about it now. But the idea was
that you collected.
We literally the whole company collected bottles, and we filled the store to the brim with bottles to show, to kind of connect people to what 8 minutes of landfill looks like. Because actually, when you see it, it's quite shocking.
And the response to that must have been amazing.
It was really viral, and we did the same in Tokyo, we did the same in Hong Kong. It sort of rolled around the world, and I hope it's really contributed to people thinking about actually how they consume recycled materials and how they can consume differently. So it's sort of, yes, as you say, it snaked through my life.
And you're also working now on leather that then can, if you put it in a landfill, landfill can basically be not recycled, but doesn't, go to waste?
Well, yeah, so after those two projects, in fact, we just worked on another project, which I'll come back to, which is to do with supermarkets, again, with recycled plastic. But all the projects we've worked on are about saving plastic from landfill and actually prompting, considering using recycled materials and a different way of thinking. But actually, I suddenly thought, well, someone said to me, actually, that there's no waste in nature. And it's such an obvious statement, but actually, why on earth are us stupid humans using landfill when nature's got it all sorted out? So I wanted to try and replicate nature in designing a fashion product. So we brought out a project called Return to Nature, which is a really beautiful, beautiful leather bag. And we can come to why leather in a second, but beautiful leather bag, which is made in a way and treated in a way, tanned in a way, finished in a way, that means that were it to ever end up in landfill, it would naturally biodegrade and compost, and in fact supports 20% stronger plant growth. So actually, it can't do harm. And that felt like a rather academic project in many ways, but I think it's important to look at end of life in fashion, this huge polluter that fashion is, and to see that there could be another way.
Who do you do this for? Is it the kids, the planet? Where do you get the inspiration or the drive to actually do more sustainably?
I'm quite scared. I'm quite scared by this climate situation. Well, I'm very scared by this climate situation. And I think that, we only look at this last summer and look at the flash floods and the fires and the heat waves. And imagine if that was a monthly situation. And I think that, we all have to change our behavior, I think, and what we do. And so I think, I love fashion with purpose. That's actually interesting for me. I think it's very hard to imagine anything being very luxurious in fashion if it's doing harm. So for me, it's I suppose it's my happy place. It's what I'm interested in and feel I should do.
And do you see a big shift actually in fashion overall? Because at the same time, you make profit by selling. And so how do you match the two? You have to sell more, but also you want to be more sustainable.
It's a really hard sort of circle to square that, and I think it's a really important question because actually we need to maintain a healthy economy. We know that probably the thing that will answer the climate issues the most effectively will be big governments paying off less wealthy governments to stop deforestation or whatever it might be. So we need to make sure that we're buying things and contributing to tax so that we can do these good things. And so and of course we need to employ people, and fashion is a fantastic employer. So how do you square that circle? And I think the fact is that we all need to carry on buying and purchasing, but buy better. Buy less, buy better. It's the classic thing. So, if you're going to buy 5 T-shirts a year, buy 2, but buy really good T-shirts. The same for bags and for any aspect of any clothing.
And do you think there's a shift overall for fashion to be more sustainable? And is that driven by stakeholders, by chief executives and entrepreneurs, or is it actually the end consumer that just wants to buy better?
I think what's lovely is it's coming from both ends, but it's actually coming particularly from the younger generation, and quite right too. I mean, it will touch them without a doubt, the climate situation. So I love the fact that it's my kids who are the most passionate. But I feel very, very responsible. I mean, it's a bit like smoking. We didn't know it harmed us when we were smoking. It's the same with the climate. So I feel very responsible, and I just think that, we're far from perfect, but we're just trying to chip off every bit we can and communicate loudly about it. It's really fun. It's exciting. And you don't have to not be successful. In fact, I would argue, I think you could be more successful by having a responsible business.
How do you think the younger generation will be different to us? Will they shop less? Will they shop, differently? Do they go out to the street and pick it?
Well, all of the above, I think. But I think the bit that's the most effective is they shop differently. And I know that my kids all buy secondhand clothing, they rent, they are very aware of the brands they buy from, and it's really cool. I'm sounding patronising, super proud of my kids and of that generation for how they behave. They're really leading the way.
Coming up, leading a company through the pandemic. The lessons Anya Heinmarch learned through a challenging period for businesses and society.
Fashion is a bit old-fashioned, honestly. The timetables are out of sync. We're delivering winter and summer and winter, and we decided it was the moment to make those changes permanently. So we decided also to use it.
that it's hard to put your head around any narrative. Let's just be honest. We've had sort of a shift in, are we in some sort of stagflation fears moment? People were talking about that all day yesterday.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
British handbag designer and entrepreneur Anya Heinmarch has a unique insight into leadership, building her company into a global fashion force. We discuss emotion in the boardroom and navigating her team through a challenging time for both business and society.
How difficult was it for you? What did you learn about yourself and the company in the pandemic?
Well, I felt actually so lucky in many ways, and I feel guilty saying that because it's been so horrible, still is so horrible for so many people. So to talk about silver linings feels really inappropriate, so forgive me. But I felt it made me realize how lucky I was in the people I work with and in my family, because actually, you know, we sort of doubled down and just rolled up our sleeves and got on with it. And of course, there were times it was not easy, but I just most of all wanted to make sure everyone felt safe and you know, we have a lot of people whose parents are overseas. But also we looked at it from overused word reset moment. But you know, fashion is a bit old-fashioned, honestly. The timetables are out of sync. We're delivering winter and summer and winter, and we decided it was the moment to make those changes permanently. So we decided also to use it to actually, you know, really reset our calendar, the way we work. We did some really nice projects for the NHS, which was really satisfying for everyone. And I think, you know, to a certain extent, we had a good war, if you like, and I feel terrible for saying that, but I think it was we learned a lot about ourselves, probably. So
do you think it's a real reset, or is it a reset, a momentary reset for
I think
fashion?
It has to be a real reset. I really do, and it was quite, in some ways, worrying to me seeing how so many things just went straight back, and not to point fingers because that's not appropriate and nor fair, but I do think that you know, the climate situation is so serious. We can't just go back to the way we were behaving. There need to be some serious changes, and so I'm very determined that we sort of stick to our guns on those changes.
Who will drive that change?
Well, for us, the company is completely committed. That's our agenda, and that's to do with timetables. It's to do with the way that we have sales, for example. I mean, you know, Black Friday feels for us to be completely wasteful. In fact, we don't obviously participate in that. To just think about how we source things. So we will be driving that, and obviously, I think everyone is thinking and finding their way through. But it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard for a lot of people right now.
And you also wrote a brilliant book that, you know, is very inspiring for many women, because you talk about being emotional in the boardroom and actually how that's okay, and actually it should also be a strength.
Well, thank you. It's a very honest book. It's the least cool book, I would say, but I wanted to write as if writing to my daughter or to you know, my younger self about what it's like, and that, you know, life isn't always easy, and actually that it's important to be honest about doubt. So it's a book about doubt and about sort of managing the many roles that women, I think, juggle, and indeed men juggle. I wanted to share honestly about how it feels, because I think people are always going to go, oh, you're so lucky, you've done well, and actually no, it's a tough journey, and I think it's important to be honest. And to your point about the emotion in the boardroom, so often I think as a woman in a boardroom, you feel it's wrong to be feminine or to be you, and actually I was once someone said to me, you know, Anya, slightly aggressive with the name, Anya, you must take the emotion out of this. And I felt a bit stung, and afterwards I realized actually no, I mustn't. Actually, emotion is what drives my business, is what actually I stand for, it's what I think I'm good at. And I think women are very good at emotion, and it's a very important thing in the workplace. So actually, I think we need to stand up for ourselves a little bit more, and so it was just a very honest book that I hope if it helps one other person, then it's done its job.
Do you think it's changing?
I really do, yes, because I think I talk about my generation, our generation, I'm a bit older than you, but as the transition generation, which is that, you know, we are working as hard as our fathers did, and yet I have the memory of how my mother was when I was growing up, which she was very much the homemaker, and she did everything so beautifully, but you can't do both roles and survive yourself. So it's been quite tough, I think, for this transition generation, but it has transitioned to a certain extent. And I think, therefore, I can see in my children that they understand that, you know, it shouldn't always be a woman's job to do all the home life admin, for example. And I can see that changing already.
Everything you do is also, it's not only creative, it's a bit quirky. It always brings a smile to everyone's face. Is this what you are? Is it your leadership motto?
Well, I don't really have a leadership motto. I've never really believed in mottos, but I do think that fashion should make you smile. Fashion is, you know, it shouldn't be taken too seriously. It's about making you feel better. No one needs more clothes or more handbags, so it is about actually making you feel happier and more confident. And listen, if we can add a smile, and you know, the chubby hearts that we did, one was floating out here, was just a moment in London when everyone was a bit sad, and it was just a nice surprise. So why not, really? And I think creativity often is a lovely way to communicate and to pull people on a journey that you're passionate about. So we do.
I mean, when you look at all these amazing, you know, projects, and it also is with the roses, the lit up roses that, you know, are for remembering people that we lost, that we loved. Do you have special projects, or is it like asking you to choose between your children?
Probably that. I think the illuminated rose garden, which is called the Ever After Garden, which is in Grosvenor Square here in London for December, and there's 25,000 illuminated roses, and we wanted to do something to benefit the Royal Marsden Cancer Charity, which is the most amazing research cancer hospital, and it's a very simple idea. It was a fundraising idea, and actually to donate a rose and contribute it's a why not, and it's quite a special experience. So, but I think probably the chubby hearts would be one of my all-time favourites. But then the chubby cloud. I know there's so many.
There's so many. What's in store for Anya in the next 5 years? That little question.
That small question. Thanks for that. Well, listen, we've got so many projects, some really exciting projects coming, and we want to lean into those projects that we've started. I care passionately about using our fashion platform to, you know, for a better purpose in a way, and we want to grow our business in a healthy, good way that's respectful. So there's a million different projects, and I'd have to kill you if I told you, obviously. So I'm sorry about that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Isn't it, just how sensitive the markets are to any commentary about trade? We did see some pressure on the yuan, we did see some pressure on the futures. That is now being reversed.
What would you like to achieve next in Saudi Arabia?
As you know, Barrick has invested in Saudi Arabia already in a partnership with Ma'aden, the state mining company, and we have an investment in the Jabal Sayed copper mine, one of the lowest cost, highest grade mines around, actually. And we have a real commitment to grow our footprint in Saudi Arabia with a particular focus on the Arabian Shield in partnership with Ma'aden. And so after tomorrow, I'm on the way to the mine. So not only how to be at the conference, but more importantly, to go and work with our team out at the mine who've really done a great job managing the COVID crisis over the last 2 years.
From New York City.
We're in London, in Sydney,
in San Francisco.
9 a.m. in Beijing and Shanghai. Good morning, everyone.
Have a great evening.
So recap the headlines.
You do not want to miss this
How
story.
are you thinking about those dynamics?
Pascal Soriot has played a vital role in tackling the biggest health crisis of our time. As the chief executive of AstraZeneca, he's overseen the production of one of the leading vaccines against COVID-19.
The COVID pandemic tested us, but at the end of the day, I think it was really a positive for our organization. First of all, because everybody is very proud of the difference we've made globally. Again, more than 2 billion doses of vaccine, 30% of global supply, or close to 30%.
Soriot has led AstraZeneca for almost a decade, fending off a takeover bid from Pfizer along the way.
I'm suddenly used to having to compete and fight for what you believe on. That drives my focus on performance. I'm used to setbacks, I'm used to challenges, and that's a spirit I always try to instill in the organization.
In this episode of Leaders with Lacroix, we talk to Pascal Soriot about what drives him in his work, where we are in fighting the pandemic, and the challenges they faced in developing their vaccine.
There's nothing really that we would do differently. Politics was always going to be part of this issue. It probably was more than we had anticipated, but it was always going to be part of this issue because we expected issues of moving vaccines around the world. We expected export bans. We expected debate around the value of vaccines. So we expected a lot of political issues and debates.
Pascal Soriot, thank you so much for joining us on Leaders with Lacroix. Do you remember where you were and who you spoke to the minute where you realized how big and how dangerous a pandemic was going to be and what role AstraZeneca could play in it?
Yeah, absolutely. January 2020. We have a large presence in China. We have about 20,000 employees in China. We are the largest pharmaceutical company there. So as you can imagine, I'm very close to our Chinese team. And very early on in January, I realized that this was going to be a big issue because, I was talking to our team in China every week, twice a week, actually, to see how they were doing. And I realized this was going to spread and become a global problem.
So what did you learn at the time about yourself, and what did you learn about AstraZeneca?
Well, I learned a lot about, the company as a whole and the kind of people who work for this company. Because we immediately thought, how do we help? What can we do to help? And, everybody across the company was ready to do something. So we started very modestly buying masks and distributing them to hospitals in needs. If you remember at the time, PPE was a big deal and the lack of masks was a big problem. We looked at our pipeline of products. How could we repurpose some of our medicines to help? We started developing a long-acting antibody combination. And then at some point, we came across the Oxford vaccine and decided to develop it. So we really learned about living our values. The whole company very quickly stepped up. We learned the value of collaboration with the private and the public sector. And we learned the value of being entrepreneurial, nimble, and also resilient, because this has been quite a journey, and the resilience of the organization was tested at times.
Pascal, what was that first phone call with Oxford like? And what was it like when actually the vaccine got approved after the trial? Was it jubilation? Was it, cautious expectations?
Well, the first phone call was really a great phone call because, we were thinking, how do we help? And we thought, we have potential treatments. We have a long-acting antibody combination in development. A vaccine would be the next step. And this looks like a great technology. And, many people at AZ have connections with Oxford University. And we know a number of people there. So the first contact by telephone was, of course, an easy one because we knew each other. And in terms of the results, it was, of course, very energizing. We were so happy to have a vaccine that works and can make a difference globally. But we never really had much time to think and celebrate. We did celebrate a little bit, but essentially we were go, 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 because time was of the essence to get approval, to manufacture. And as you know, we had a few challenges in some geographies. In some geographies in the world, it went very well, and in other countries, it was more challenging to supply. So we didn't have much time to think and celebrate. We were focused on delivering and making sure people could get access to our vaccine.
Yeah, and I imagine between the go, and of course being in the middle of a political firestorm in certain cases as well, was quite challenging. What was the most infuriating or frustrating part of the process?
Well, nothing was infuriating. You know, in our industry, we're used to challenges. I mean, you tackle a big problem like cancer, and you try to develop new treatments, and sometimes you succeed, sometimes you fail. And sometimes some of those failures are, of course, large ones and very disappointing. So we are used to dealing with challenges and success and setbacks and sometimes criticisms. And, you know, it's part of life, really. So we had to take it on the chin and deal with it and try our best. And our focus was really on, again, delivering the vaccine to the world. And, you know, I think people sometimes forget that Europe, of course, is a very important continent. Look, I'm a European, I love Europe. But Europe, not everybody in the world lives in Europe. I mean, there's another more than 7 billion people living outside the US and Europe. And in many, many parts of the world, in most parts of the world, everything went well. So when we were looking at it on a global basis, we realized we had to help Europe more than to deliver more vaccine. But we also knew that elsewhere in the world, everything was going very well.
Pascal, was there anything that you would do differently with hindsight, the benefit of hindsight, in Europe? And do you feel like you were unfairly politicized at moments?
You know, I mean, I think sometimes people try to read too much with hindsight. I mean, it's like running a clinical trial. If the trial fails, people will ask you, would you do this trial again? I mean, if you know it fails, of course you will not run it again. But this is hindsight. I mean, so there's nothing really that we would do differently. Again, you know, politics was always going to be part of this issue. It probably was more than we had anticipated, but it was always going to be part of this issue because we expected issues of moving vaccines around the world. We expected export bans. We expected, you know, debate around the value of vaccines. So we expected a lot of political issues and debates. It was more than, in Europe, it was more than expected, of course. But we, you know, stayed totally focused on delivering the vaccine and solving the problems as they came.
Up next, Pascal Soriot discusses the battle against vaccine disinformation and how the pandemic could transform the world for years to come.
It's likely that this pandemic will be endemic over time. I mean, it is already more or less endemic in some geographies in the world, which means it will be like the flu. It will come back on a regular basis, and people may have to be vaccinated. Now, the question is, do you need to be vaccinated every year, every 2 years? We don't know that, and it will depend on the durability of these vaccines.
Do you think that electric vehicles could reach 10% of the American market by the end of this year?
That's difficult to say, like you said, because it'll be both, not only demand, based on the demand we are seeing for our vehicles, and the rest of the industry is seeing. It feels like the demand is certainly there. But the question will be how quickly can we, all of us, execute to build capacity to meet that demand. And that's what we are very busy doing. Within the next 24 months, we expect to get to about 600,000 battery electric units globally. And that's before our bigger investments that we're making in Kentucky and Tennessee both for batteries as well as assembly come online, because they don't come online until about 2025.
Pascal Soriot has an unparalleled insight into fighting the coronavirus pandemic as chief executive of pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca. We discussed the challenges posed by vaccine disinformation, making drugs sustainably, and what COVID-19 could mean for us in the years to come.
Will we need yearly booster shots to deal with the pandemic? I know, again, it's still early days, but how do you see this panning out over the next 4, 5, 10 years?
I think it's likely that this pandemic will be endemic over time. I mean, it is already more or less endemic in some geographies in the world, which means it will be like the flu. It will come back on a regular basis, and people may have to be vaccinated. And now the question is, do you need to be vaccinated every year, every 2 years? We don't know that, and it will depend on the durability of these vaccines. So again, that's why we need more data, more follow-up. And collecting data is absolutely fundamental, because right now we are in the urgency of the moment, which is to stop this pandemic from spreading. But we also have to think about how we're going to live with this virus being endemic, like the flu is, and therefore how often do we vaccinate people? Only time and data will tell us that.
Is that why you've recently also changed this, for-profit model? And would it have been wiser to wait for the WHO to call it an endemic instead of a pandemic?
Well, you have to think about the fact that the for-profit approach, which, by the way, as a reminder, is always going to be a modest profit, applies to new orders. So the new orders will be delivered mostly next year. So we are really talking about next year. Now, next year, hopefully, we will have, as a society globally, made even more progress in terms of vaccinating people. So that's the environment that you have to consider this decision. Number one. Number two, our price will always be quite reasonable. So it will go from no profit for some countries to some profit for others that have more ability to pay. But we will always look for modest profitability, because at the end of the day, our company is about cancer, it's about cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, rare diseases. And we will never look to make enormous profits out of this vaccine.
Pascal, whose job is it to fight misinformation about vaccines or drug companies in general?
Well, we have a team of people who are constantly looking at, what is being said about vaccines and other products, but mostly vaccines, of course. And there has been a lot of misinformation in the world, in social media in particular, about vaccines. Unfortunately, this sometimes influences people. You have to really keep in mind, vaccination is the first line of defense. And at the end of the day, whichever vaccine you take is going to be better than no vaccination. And you have multiple different vaccines around the world that are available to people. And it's unfortunate that this misinformation is actually creating anxiety and creating doubts in people's mind. And we try to correct this misinformation where we can, but I have to say, there's so much going on in social media that it's often difficult to cope with it all. Yeah.
I mean, are you lobbying technological companies like social media companies to do more in that fight, which is, I guess, your fight with the regulator and also politicians? What
we will try to do is make sure that people stay true to the facts and the science, and correct any misinformation that is put out there, and then try to stop people from spreading incorrect information. But again, as I said, it's very difficult because it is happening so much in social media across the world. You really find it difficult to control it, not control, but to correct everything. At the end of the day, I think you also have to rely on positive information, correct information that governments and experts can actually bring to the public to give them the right information to make decisions for themselves.
Pascal, we also had a good conversation, of course, at Glasgow COP26. Are you making or anticipating making any changes to some of your drug developments or how you distribute drugs to be more environmentally friendly?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said before, some of the societal priorities are really critical, not only because as a company you need to do the right thing and contribute to sustainable development of the world, but also because if you want to bring your team with you, you have to address some of these issues that are critical to them. And sustainability, climate change is one of those. So we committed to be carbon neutral by 2025 for our own operations and carbon negative by 2030 for the totality of our supply chain. And the supply chain part is the most challenging part because we have good plans in place to be carbon neutral by 2025 for our own operations. The site in Cambridge, the R&D site we're opening, is a good example of a sustainable site. The most challenging piece is the totality of the supply chain. And so we are engaging with other companies in the industry to collaborate, to work with our suppliers, to work together to help them reduce their carbon footprint so we can achieve our goals. And this is something that the sustainable market initiatives of the Prince Charles can really help us achieve, bringing companies across the industry and the healthcare system as a whole together to collaborate to impact our carbon emissions.
Up next, showing leadership under pressure. From fending off takeover bids to navigating political firestorms, Pascal Soriot takes us inside some of the key challenges in his time in charge of AstraZeneca.
I'm suddenly used to having to compete and fight for what you believe on. That drives my focus on performance. I'm used to setbacks, I'm used to challenges, and that's a spirit I always try to instill in the organization.
However you get your news.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak with Lee.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Daybreak Australia. This is Bloomberg Technology. This is Bloomberg Green.
On TV, radio, and the web, this is Bloomberg.
Daybreak with Lee.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Daybreak Australia. This is Bloomberg Technology. This is Bloomberg Green.
On TV, radio, and the web, this is Bloomberg.
Access the financial world on demand. Hear from leading economists, policymakers, and industry experts via live and on-demand webinars, only from Bloomberg. Start exploring to see what's moving the markets. Visit Bloomberg.com/webinars.
I think what we've seen during this period of time is that communicating via video is not a fad. We are using it in all aspects of our lives, for work, for learning, for communicating, for staying in touch.
Pascal Soriot's tenure as chief executive of one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies has been anything but simple. During his decade in charge of AstraZeneca, he's fended off a takeover bid from Pfizer, secured the largest deal in the company's history with a $39 billion purchase of Alexion, and faced a rocky road to produce a coronavirus vaccine. We discussed how he navigated these challenges and the role his leadership style played. Pascal, you've been in charge of AstraZeneca more or less over a decade, and you've transformed the company. You've also had to fend off, the approach by Pfizer. How does the pandemic compare to that?
Yes, I've been used to challenges and setbacks and success, of course, over the years. And we've had, as a company, we've had many more successes than we have had setbacks. But we did have setbacks across our pipeline developing new products. A few years ago, we had a large study that was very important that failed, and our share price suffered from it. So, it's never a straightforward journey in our industry. So certainly the approach by Pfizer many years ago was something that pressure tested the organization and us as a management team. The COVID vaccine, the COVID pandemic tested us. But at the end of the day, I think it was really a positive for our organization. First of all, because everybody is very proud of the difference we've made globally. Again, more than 2 billion doses of vaccine, 30% of global supply, or close to 30%. Secondly, it really tested us as an organization, and it showed the commitment of our people, the resilience of our people. And in our industry, you have to be resilient. You have to innovate, but you also have to be resilient. Sometimes your idea doesn't work the first time around, and you have to keep going. So it really tested the resilience of the organization, and it really reinforced the team spirit across the company. So, of course, it was sometimes a little bit stressful, but overall, it really helped us as an organization mature and grow and become even stronger.
Pascal, how would you describe your leadership style? So I know you've talked in the past about, growing up in the outskirts of Paris. Are you a fighter? Well, I am certainly used to having to stand up for what you believe in, and in quote unquote fighting for your ideas, and driving change is not always simple. So I'm certainly used to having to compete and fight for what you believe on, and really that drives my focus on performance. Nothing really came easy to me in my life, so I'm used to setbacks, I'm used to challenges, and that's a spirit I always try to instill in the organization, which is we have to perform, we have to drive innovation, we have to be resilient, we have to accept challenges and setbacks, and we have to stay focused on the goal. The goal is to come up with new medicines that make a difference to patients. It's very simple. And then we will, through this journey, we will have ups and downs, and we just have to take it as it comes and keep pushing. How would you describe, Pascal, your leadership style? And actually, is it different being a leader in 2022 to when it was like in 2012? Yes, absolutely. I mean, it changes constantly. Society changes, people's expectations change. What worked 15, 20 years ago may not work today. Technology changes, and it has an impact on society and the way we operate. But I think what always works is really trying to inspire people for a common goal, developing a shared purpose. People are never so excited and committed as when they share a common purpose. And our purpose is really to follow the science, do what's right for patients, and then build a portfolio of medicines that will change the practice of the treatment of cancer, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, and also today rare diseases. So that's what I try to do, to build a shared purpose and a common goal, and then bring to people what they need actually to succeed, the tools they need, the cultural environment they need. And these days, different things are important to people. I mean, diversity, for instance, has always been important, but it's never been as important as today. People are realizing the importance of working in a diverse organization. Sustainability, climate change is becoming critically important to people, especially young people. So if as a company you don't commit to some of those important priorities for the world, then you don't bring people with you. Pascal, Prince Charles has opened your new £1 billion research and development facility in the UK. What looks most promising in the pipeline? What are you most hopeful on? Sometimes people ask me that question, and it's always like choosing between your kids. I mean, which one do you prefer? I like all our products. We have a tremendous lineup of new products that treat cancer. Of course, recently we had absolutely tremendous results in breast cancer. With a new product, we are developing a so-called antibody-drug conjugate that really delivered amazing results in the treatment of HER2 breast cancer. We also have had results in kidney disease, heart disease. We've also had other results in liver cancer, biliary tract cancer, which are cancers that haven't seen much progress in the last few years.
We've had results in the treatment of Wilson disease, a rare disease which is an accumulation of copper in the body. So we've had results across a whole range of conditions, and we continue building the pipeline. And here in Cambridge, we are at the heart of science, really, in the Cambridge community, and we have tremendous technologies to develop new products for the future.
Pascal, in the 10 years you've been in charge, what do you still like most about your job?
Learning every day, discovering new things. Science is the most exciting thing you can imagine. And as I said a minute ago, the development and the progress of science, in the last few years has been incredible. And in fact, you cannot know everything, and even though you stay curious and you try to learn, it's moving so fast. So, learning is the most exciting, and making an impact. When you get results like we got recently for the treatment of breast cancer, liver cancer, Wilson disease, kidney disease, and you are helping patients and making a huge difference, that is definitely very exciting, and it's hard to be bored in our industry, trust me.
Yeah, I'm sure. What do you like least about your job then?
There's not much I don't like in my job. I try to keep the administrative part as little as possible, but of course, there are some dimensions to this job that have to be considered as well. But I try to stay focused on what matters. And what matters is science, developing new products, meeting people, recruiting tremendous scientists, talented people across not only R&D, but also our commercial teams, our manufacturing teams, and staying close to where the action is taking place. That's the only way, I think, to run a company, and that's the best way to remain excited and suddenly making a difference.
Pascal Soriot, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Francine. It was a great pleasure to be with you today.
Market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
You mentioned the 1.5 million tests. That's quite a feat. At the same time, I've seen estimates that say that'll get you through about a week or so. What do you do after that?
Let's be smart with our resources. Why not use the tests strategically when you need them? How are we using them? A child is diagnosed with COVID in a classroom. We give that entire classroom take-home test kits so their parents can test them, so we can determine if we should close down the school or just the classroom, or what we should do with that particular facility area. What has happened in the past, you had one diagnosis, we want to close the entire school. That just makes no sense. Instead of using our resources in a strategic fashion, the science has shown just because one child has COVID in the classroom, it doesn't mean the entire school or the classroom is infected. We're going to be smarter, and we're going to pivot, and most importantly, we're going to defeat COVID.
Kai-Fu Lee is a world-leading figure in AI, with a career spanning 4 decades in the research, development, and implementation of the technology.
I found there's actually this new exciting area of study called artificial intelligence, which was about studying how humans think and make decisions and how computers might be taught to do the same. So I thought this would be the final exploration of the human race.
Kai-Fu Lee was an early pioneer in speech recognition and a world-renowned computer scientist. He's worked at the likes of Google and Microsoft and was president of Google China. He now heads Sinovation Ventures, a VC firm focused on tech companies in China.
The amazing thing about AI is that you can feed it more data than it needs. It will basically figure out what's useful. So once you have data, you just keep throwing it in.
In this episode of Leaders with Lacqua, we talked to Kai-Fu Lee about his career in AI, how big data has given power to tech companies, and how the advancement of artificial technology has a geopolitical side.
I think both countries are, we're seeing tremendous AI companies leveraging the strengths of each country. In the case of US, enterprise software. In the case of China, manufacturing.
Kai-Fu Lee, thank you so much for joining us on Leaders with Lacqua. So how did you choose AI as your field of expertise?
It was actually my freshman year in college back in '79 that I started to study computer science at Columbia. And I found there's actually this new exciting area of study called artificial intelligence, which was about studying how humans think and make decisions and how computers might be taught to do the same. So I thought this would be the final exploration of the human race. And I was a bit naive and very optimistic and felt this was just the most exciting thing to do, that I could, help realize all those things we saw in science fiction and go deeply understand the most important thing, that is the mystery of the universe.
Yeah, just a small thing, the mystery of the universe. And then you started working on machine learning and pattern recognition. What did you see in computers and AI then that the others missed?
Then I found out how difficult the problem was and how little that we actually understood about the human cognition, that I think someone who is not an expert in the area would think that to make computers intelligent, we first understand how we become intelligent. Then we teach the computers just like we teach our children. And then I tried to do that. Other researchers tried to do that. And that really didn't work out. And I stumbled upon a field called machine learning. And that field basically says, hey, wait a minute, it is not necessarily necessary to replicate the human brain. The computer has a different brain. It has a CPU and some memory and storage, and it thinks faster than we do, but it thinks differently. It thinks about data. So maybe there is another way, which is forget about how the human cognition works. Forget about why we make the decisions we make. If we just feed the computer lots of data and tell it what's the right answer, when it's really right, and then we keep showing more and more and more data, and one day maybe it would figure out how to make decisions, classifications, and predictions. And that was the road I embarked in the mid-'80s, late '80s, when I started my PhD at Carnegie Mellon.
And Kai-Fu, I think you were also talking there about the tensions of some of the rule-based approach, right, that we saw back then, because it wasn't easy to see exactly what the right way to understand AI was, whether it was rule-based, so you inject a lot of information, or whether it's neural networks. How did you choose what field you wanted to be involved in?
Well, for me, honestly, it was trial and error. When I went to Carnegie Mellon in 1983, my advisor, Raj Reddy, who later became a Turing Award recipient, suggested I should try expert systems because that was his expertise and his intuition. And I tried it for a year. And then I saw that it wasn't going to become scalable. And yes, it could still be made to work someday, but I needed to do my PhD thesis in 4 or 5 years. And I wanted my thesis to make a big difference. And I didn't think rule-based system would do it. That that computers just have different structure of the brain than we do. By teaching it all the rules of how we make decision may not be the right way. And then I started looking at using machine learning algorithms, the equivalent of neural networks, and then I made some progress and some more progress. And then one day I drummed enough courage to ask my advisor, can I please try this other approach? And he was very supportive, very generous, and said, it's okay, you work on this different approach, I will give you all my support, including machines and data. And with his help, I was able to demonstrate that speech recognition of any speaker was actually feasible. And that was my PhD thesis in 1988, which was viewed as a significant progress, if not a breakthrough at the time.
Up next, big data collides with artificial intelligence. Kai-Fu Lee's views on the power of information and how that's given market power to the social media giants.
Even if you were able to build exactly this software, the same pixels and buttons and interfaces and users and clicks and content and newsfeed, you still can't compete with Facebook because your new company doesn't know how to send things to make users click and pay.
Fragile is the European energy complex?
The European energy complex has been incredibly fragile for a number of months now, and it just seems to just keep getting hit with new crises.
There are a lot of EVs coming to market, and I'm wondering, do you think that just the market share explodes and there's room for everybody? Or is there a specific market that you're going after right now?
At Vingroup and VinFast is the same way. We're building premium quality products for mass market. And we do expect that there's an irreversible trend to move from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles. So yes, the market share will expand.
How much money do you think you're going to have to sort of pump into everything right now? You also mentioned, this is an announcement from last year, that you're going to start a factory here in the U.S. Where are you in that? What kind of money are you looking to have to deploy?
So far, VinFast has put in about $6 billion so far into VinFast. And we plan to have a few more $1 billion investment.
Before rising up the ranks of tech giants like Microsoft, Apple, and Google, Kai-Fu Lee started his career at Carnegie Mellon, where he built a computer program that defeated the world champion in the strategy game Othello. It was a forerunner of the most noted milestone in artificial intelligence, when IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue beat chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov. It's been referred to as the brain's last stand, the moment the human race was found to be less intelligent than machines. I asked Kai-Fu Lee how he felt watching it unfold and whether he was surprised.
At the time, I knew that would happen because it was a fellow student and friend, C.B. Shu, who made the Deep Blue really happen, because he and I talked about the progress of machine learning, about the computer games, and about the complexity of chess. And actually, I worked on Computer Othello and beat the world champion in 1985. So he and I more or less plotted hardware progress that it was likely to become a grandmaster or even the world champion in another 10 or 15 years. So we were more or less on track because it was the same technologies, except made super fast, because CB was a brilliant hardware engineer. So he built an amazing supercomputer designed to do one thing, play chess. So I wasn't surprised at all. What was surprising was then we looked at the game of Go and we said, wow, this is exponentially harder than chess. I don't know if when AI can beat that, be the best human Go player, maybe never. And I was really more proven wrong in the much more recently by AlphaGo.
Okay, if you talk to me a little bit about where we are in understanding the human brain. Are we at 5% of understanding it? Are we at 10%? Or are we really just scratching the surface?
Certainly at 5% or lower. We know some things about parts of the brain and their functions. We can look at a scan of the brain and guess some things about it, but we don't really know. People talk about downloading and uploading from or to our brain, but we don't know what format they're stored. We don't know how many things that we take as granted, like common sense, intuition works. And we don't also know how we do reasoning, analytical thinking, analogies, strategizing, understanding across domains, and certainly not creativity and doing things out of the box. And we have no idea where we get our self-awareness and our emotions and how we gain compassion and love and have emotions like that. So we really don't have any linkage of how to do these things. How our brain does these things, and so I think we're still decades away from achieving that.
I mean, there's a turning point in 2012 where we look at neural networks. What exactly is an artificial neuron, and how does it work? I know you've tried to explain it beautifully in your book, talking about layers, but that really changed the way that AI could actually function going forward.
Right. So neural networks is a set of technologies invented by three brilliant researchers. Many of them began around 30 or 40 years ago, as I did. And they ventured to propose that if we build a set of neural networks that are somewhat roughly architected like our brain, so but instead of teaching it rules, you would show it examples. And the examples will be fed into the neural network, and then you tell it what answer you want to get. Then the neural network would self-adjust to get this piece of data to lead to that piece of outcome. So let's say I train it with pictures of dogs and cats and label each dog with the word dog and each cat with the word cat. And then if I showed it tens of thousands of examples, it would learn to separate dogs and cats. Then you can see how that can be led to speech recognition by showing it words that people have spoken or the speech signals people have spoken. And you can have language understanding to go from text to meaning. You can go from evaluating things that have financial impact. Like these are the attributes of people who borrow money and pay back. These are the attributes of people who borrow money and default, and use that to judge when a bank should lend money to people. And a company like Facebook can look at all the attributes of a person, what they have read and clicked on, and be given all the possible news items and show the one that's most likely to elicit a reaction from the user. So that's why the internet companies are so powerful, because they know so much about us. They can keep showing us things that will make us click and watch and pay.
When we talk about actually some of the data used to understand some of these algorithms, the right algorithms, what kind of data are they using? Is it the one from the social media? Is it the one that we have on our phone? What exactly is being collected, and what's most useful to generate AI?
The amazing thing about AI is that you can feed it more data than it needs. It will basically figure out what's useful. So once you have data, you just keep throwing it in. So if you happen to have all my Facebook click-through transaction data, that's pretty good in judging what videos I will click and watch and which ones I'll buy. But if you happen to also know my age, where I live, what I bought on Amazon, what I searched on Google, that can all be fed in. And that is exactly why it allows big internet companies, the bigger they are, the more data they have, and then the higher their prediction power, the more money they make, then they keep getting bigger, which is why there's concerns about companies that are very large not having too much of our data. And if you are starting from scratch, let's say you want to build a Facebook competitor, you don't have any of that data. So even if you were able to build exactly this software, the same pixels and buttons and interfaces and users and clicks and content and newsfeed, you still can't compete with Facebook because your new company doesn't know how to send things to make users click and pay.
So how much widespread disruption could we see, and will it actually lead to mass unemployment?
Well, one of the capabilities clearly is that AI will first learn to do tasks that are routine. So anything that we humans do that are routine are, I think, in danger of displacement. So people who think they do repetitive tasks, routine tasks, whether it's blue collar at an assembly line or white collar because someone is mostly pushing papers, getting approvals, sending routine emails, answering customer emails and phone calls. Well, those things will all be replaced, as well as many other tasks like driving, transportation, moving things around, deliveries, and many even jobs that are commercial in warehouses, and probably somewhere between 40 and 50% of the tasks that humans do can be routinely replicated and beaten by AI at essentially zero marginal cost. So that displacement will undoubtedly happen. At the same time, AI will also amplify our capabilities. AI can make great suggestions for someone who's using their strategic thinking, creativity, and ideas and business thinking to become a better CEO, a better scientist, a better physician, and so on. And also, I think AI will be a great tool for many jobs that may become more service in nature, so that a healthcare professional would rely on AI diagnosis, and a teacher would rely on AI to give homework assignments and tests, but still do the teaching himself or herself. So it would be symbiotic, enabling, amplifying, but also displacing, depends on case by case.
What are you most excited about? Is it the field of medicine? I don't know whether cancer treatment will be significantly enhanced by the use of AI, and whether that is actually maybe the most exciting use in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think general healthcare is the area I'm most excited about. And the reason is that it's poised for a breakthrough. As I mentioned before, in any field, there's a tremendous amount of data that will enable the ability to use AI. And the more data there is, the harder it is for human to comprehend the data, then the more powerful will the AI be. And for healthcare data, we have not only our hospital records, but also blood tests, genetic sequencing, wearable computing outputs, all of which can be fed in a way that no human doctors can comprehend. So that can help with diagnosis, prescription, reading of radiology, and also preventive maintenance and post-illness care, but also, as you said, drug discovery, coming up with new treatments by combining the tremendous amount of data and observations we see and letting this giant data crunching AI power crunch all the data that's coming from healthcare.
Coming up, the geopolitics of artificial intelligence. As the US and China try to turbocharge their AI capabilities, Kai-Fu Lee gives his assessment of the opportunities and the risks that this rapidly developing technology could bring.
I think all companies, individuals, and countries need to understand the impact of AI and what can and need to be done. And I give autonomous weapons as the most obvious example that countries need to look at.
that it's hard to put your head around any narrative. Let's just be honest. We've had sort of a shift in, are we in some sort of stagflation fears moment? People were talking about that all day yesterday.
Crypto, you have a world of young people that want their own financial system and their own culture. And it is very powerful, and I'm a big believer in it.
Kai-Fu Lee is one of the world's leading thinkers in AI and has a unique position, having worked for U.S. tech giants inside China. We got into the geopolitics of artificial intelligence, and I started by asking who would win the race between the world's two largest economies in the decades to come.
I think both U.S. and China have tremendous strengths in AI. I think their strengths are actually a bit different. The commercial companies in the commercial areas, I think U.S. tends to be much stronger in enterprise applications like C3 AI and Palantir and companies like that. And China is now showing a lot of progress in robotics, especially for manufacturing and warehouses. And the two countries are both developing great companies in autonomous vehicles, healthcare, and internet. But largely, those companies don't compete against each other due to the current geopolitical tendencies. So I think both countries are, we're seeing tremendous AI companies leveraging the strengths of each country. In the case of US, enterprise software. In the case of China, manufacturing. So I hope AI will end up making companies in both countries winners.
In China, are Chinese companies looking to, have more of an influence domestically rather than internationally, or will that change over time?
I think right now, most of the Chinese AI companies are focused domestically. And should they go abroad, they're more likely to go to countries that have a strong commercial relationship with China and no limitations on technologies. So perhaps the Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa would be more likely, maybe South America, whereas I think US will tend to have more influence on the traditional areas like English-speaking countries and Europe and Japan. So I think each country will naturally go to the regions where it has some advantage or it has fewer limitations.
Kai-Fu, what does the world look like in 40 years? So, is it going to be like the Terminator, and do you get asked that very often at dinner parties, or what's your vision on where we'll end up?
I think it's two very different possible outcomes. As you know, I wrote the book AI 2041. We try to look 20 years out. You want me to look 40 years out. I do think we have two possible outcomes. There's not a lot of scenarios in the middle. I think either we get our act together and figure out how countries can collaborate and finally realize there are many issues we can work together on, like climate and healthcare, and that in a positive exemplars lead the world and technology problems are overcome, then we really reach a world of plenitude, where all these technologies will basically eradicate poverty and hunger, and also positive uses will make us live healthier. That's one outcome. The other is that technologies can be misused by people. I don't think technologies will become evil itself and like a Terminator or a dystopia like that, but I do think they provide very powerful weapon to bad people. And terrorists, for example, or countries that choose to use them in a very damaging way to the rest of the world, because I think technology amplifies people's capabilities, and using, take autonomous weapons as an example, it's something that could wipe out lots of people targetedly. So I think the opportunity to do bad things and the consequences of doing bad things will change, so that bad people will be able to do more terrible things with less costs. And in that bad scenario, the countries aren't able to contain these bad people with a malevolent intent, and they, empowered and emboldened by technology weapons, can really lead to negative outcomes.
So, Kai-Fu, what does that mean? That governments need to step up their understanding of AI and not be left behind, so that it's not only private companies that actually are at the forefront of this revolution?
Yes, I think all companies, individuals, and countries need to understand the impact of AI and what can and need to be done. And I give autonomous weapons as the most obvious example that countries need to look at, because they are incredibly dangerous. You can build a $1,000 device that can be a personal assassinator, bringing no risk to you. Imagine what that happens in the hands of, terrorists. And I think that's the area people need to step up first. And also we need to watch for other dangers, that AI and other technologies like quantum computers, like CRISPR, AI is not the only technology. There are probably half a dozen similar technologies that could lead to huge disasters for humanity, if not bring us to an existential threat.
Kai-Fu, you're truly a pioneer in your field. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I would have told myself to take more risks and go after what I love, as opposed to listening too much to what one should do in one's place, because there's so much change. The only thing that isn't going to change is change itself. So become adaptive, be bold, and if you see something you want to devote your life to, do it. Don't worry about the risks. The younger you are, the less you have to risk, and the more risk you should take in order to make the biggest difference in the world.
Kai-Fu Lee, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really a reminder, isn't it, just how sensitive the markets are to any commentary about trade. We did see some pressure on the yuan, we did see some pressure on the futures. That is now being reversed.
This week, how hydrogen can transform our energy usage. We'll look at why the universe's most abundant element could be a game changer in the climate revolution.
We don't need the laws of physics to change to be able to use hydrogen on our planes.
From iron ore to green hydrogen, one of Australia's richest men tells us about his pivot to sustainable energy.
Let's take action. It's practical, it's implementable. Let's do it now.
Plus, the hydrogen revolution. We'll speak with the CEO of Italian utilities firm Snam about his new book and how green hydrogen could be competitive within 5 years.
Costs are coming down and people are waking up to the fact that it's the only way to decarbonize certain sectors.
I'm Kaylee Lyons from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, and don't miss this week's edition of Bloomberg Green, airing on Friday on Quick Take and over the weekend on TV and online.
Thanks for doing it. I'm so sorry I'm late. I know I'm coming late. But
not at all. It gave us more chance to tweak the lights for the 50,000th time. So.
You're doing well?
Yes. How often are you coming into the office these days?
About 2 to 3 days a week, yeah. How about you? I guess you come in.
Yeah, I'm in every day now, so no more kids on the set. I have to ask, is your son still mining Ethereum?
He and I literally were talking about it last night. He's like, Dad, you are the one who made me give up on it. I'm like, no, I didn't. But yeah, the thing that's good about this is I think it excites a whole new generation about technology, which is good.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for doing it, and thank you for coming down to do it.
I'm ready to go when you guys are.
From Google headquarters in Mountain View, California, this is Bloomberg Studio 1.0 with Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai. Born and raised in India, Pichai had almost no access to a computer until college, but just years later found himself rising through the ranks of the world's largest search engine. In 2015, it was Pichai that Google co-founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin chose to run Google and later Alphabet. Now valued at more than $2 trillion, it's one of the most powerful companies on the planet.
Sundar, it's great to be with you today.
Thanks for doing this.
Great to be here in person. Google just hit a $2 trillion market cap. Alphabet, I should say. Where is the next $1 trillion going to come from?
You know, I've always felt, your market cap valuation is an effect of the value you provide. And I feel fortunate our mission is timeless. There is more need to organize information than ever before. I still feel search is our biggest moonshot as a company. People will want radically more conversational experiences. They will want what we call multimodal experiences. They may speak to search. They may look at something and ask what the information is. Being able to adapt to all that and evolve search will continue to be the biggest opportunity. We are so excited about, be it YouTube, cloud, our hardware products, Google Play. So we're building a diverse set of businesses, and underlying all of it is the investments we are making in AI. We've invested $100 billion in R&D in the past 5 years. And so applying AI in a deep way is probably where we will create the biggest opportunity ahead.
Microsoft is making some big acquisitions. Apple's anti-ad tracking technology is shaking up the industry. What do you make of these competitive moves? Your competitors say they're on the right side of history. Are they?
I look at the fact that there are 3 billion people who have access to knowledge at their fingertips. I look at the opportunity we provide. I look at the skills people are learning through YouTube. I feel it everywhere when I go talk to people. And providing access to information and knowledge, I think will end up being on the right side of history as well.
Your predecessor, Eric Schmidt, told me that he feels the latest Facebook revelations are disturbing. Google also has access to massive amounts of our data. Why should half the world's population, more than half the world's population, trust Google to do the right thing?
We are trying to do more with less data. One of the biggest changes we made was making auto-delete the default setting for new users signing in, and now over 2 billion users have their data continuously being deleted. Look, we rely on trust for people. Every day when people come to Google, they place their trust in us in vulnerable moments. It may be a health issue on which they are trying to understand. There's no more important responsibility we have than doing right by that trust. When we provide Gmail to journalists and realize that their accounts may be under attack by an authoritarian government, mean, that's what, motivates us to make sure, be it privacy, be it security, be it trust, we are doing the right thing. Over time, regulation will have an important role to play here. I think privacy regulation is important. In areas like AI, regulation will be important. And so I think, those will be part of the answers as well.
The Facebook fallout, that Instagram can be toxic to teens, for example. Has this raised more or new concerns for you about the impact of technology, tech addiction, algorithms, YouTube even, on our children and their development and their mental health? I mean, you're a parent and you also have a lot of power over how this plays out.
Like you, bringing kids up in this modern digital world is something I think all parents are anxious about, rightfully so. I think, it's part of why a few years ago when in YouTube, we were exposed to a set of concerns, we invested, it became our number one priority to work hard at it. The reason YouTube invested so much in developing YouTube Kids as a safe destination for young children and so on. Look, technology is going to play a big role in helping give children the next wave of opportunity as well. So the answer is to develop it responsibly. We have changed our balance in these areas and saying we think about content responsibility first, and then the pace of development or new features in areas like YouTube. And so that's how we have approached it for a while.
Facebook and Microsoft are all in on the metaverse. What do you think about the metaverse? What's Google's metaverse strategy?
It's always been obvious to me that computing over time will adapt to people and people adapting to computers. You won't always interact with computing in a black rectangle in front of you. So just like you speak to people, you see and interact, computers will become more immersive. They'll be there when you need it to be. So I've always been excited about the future of immersive computing, ambient computing, AR. And we are
Does that count as the metaverse? Is that what that is?
Metaverse is, I think it means different things to different people. The way I think about it is evolving computing in an immersive way with augmented reality. As part of that, there'll be many experiences, some of which will be immersive, interactive virtual worlds, which is the metaverse concept. And but I think this doesn't belong to any company, right? I mean, this is the evolution of internet and the web, the internet. All of it will continue to evolve.
Google was famous for its campuses where you could go and never leave. You had everything you ever wanted. Now you've said they can be flexible. They can work from home. They can work at the office. They can be hybrid. They can work remotely permanently, perhaps. Are you committed to really letting them do this forever? And if so, how does that change the future of work and society?
Look, we've really embraced the fact that the future is going to be flexible. At Google, we've always tried to give, agency to our employees. But we do realize the importance of bringing people together, the creativity, community, and collaboration that comes with it. So the balance we are striking is this notion of 3-2. But we are giving the strength of our company is we have more locations than most of the companies. So we're giving people choice to move anywhere in the world. 4 weeks they can work from anywhere. We're going to accommodate 20% of our workforce to be remote over time. So we're going to embrace that flexibility. And
forever?
Forever, yeah. And we're committed to it. Through it all, it forces us to design better products. And since people use Google Workspace to run their companies, I think it gives us a chance to innovate and bring all that out. I think there is so much value in giving people more flexibility between their personal and professional lives. And I think it will lead to people being happier. And I think companies can be successful in that model. And so we are trying to get the best of both worlds, but embrace the flexibility and see where we go.
How confident are you that when you look back, you'll be able to say Google did enough to help save the world?
We are putting so much energy and resource into it.
what's happening on Wall Street.
It's the basic law of economics.
The Fed is telling us this is transitory.
Need to catch up?
This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston.
We've got the information and insights.
David, you just hit the nail right on the head.
From businesses most influential and instrumental.
And that's the way you run good risk management.
But we need to invest in our systems.
Bloomberg Wall Street Week premieres Friday with replays all weekend on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
How difficult was it to go to investors and say, invest, give money, put money into a travel tech company within this environment?
It wasn't that difficult because TravelPerk is doing much, much better than the rest of the industry. In fact, we are at the moment growing at 4 times revenue of pre-COVID numbers.
You grew up in India, you lived through droughts, water was scarce. How has that experience shaped your feelings about the urgency of stopping climate change?
You know, I grew up in Chennai, India, and a big part of my childhood was, really pretty severe water scarcity. You know, we would get water trucked in for the streets and stand in lines and carry a few buckets of water home. There was no running water for many years. And, but fast forward a few years ago, Chennai had 1 in a 100-year flood, which was a very extreme event, kind of drove home. That combined with a few years ago, waking up to the orange skies here in the Bay Area, seeing the look of concern on my children's faces and having to explain it, all kind of drove home in a deeply personal way for me. So I think it's the most defining issue we all face, and definitely something very motivated on working towards.
I remember waking up to those orange skies too and having to have that same conversation with my kids. Do you think the commitments at COP26 went far enough?
I'm encouraged by many things. We have to tip our hat to the people who are working super hard. The issues and the trade-offs are genuinely difficult. You have to keep the economies growing. It really matters. But at the same time, it's a pretty severe, urgent issue. So I'm encouraged by the progress. I think it builds on the Paris Agreement, so I can see the forward progress. There is the deep anxiety that it all may not be enough. But we have to be optimistic and keep pushing.
Google has set some aggressive targets to run entirely on clean energy, to be the first tech giant to do so 24 hours a day. How confident are you that when you look back on this time, let's say a decade from now, you'll be able to say Google did enough to help save the world?
We are putting so much energy and resource into it. It's always been kind of a founding value for us. We've been carbon neutral since 2007. We've been matching our energy consumption with renewable energy over the past few years. So this, we are now pushing, it's a moonshot, to be 24/7 carbon free. That means every search you do, every email you send, that we can do it carbon free. We were at 61% in 2019. The number is now 67%. We have set our goals to be 100% by 2030. And to do it globally, that means we have to solve new things which we haven't done before. Wind and solar alone won't be enough. We just started geothermal in Nevada. We will be investing in newer technologies, including carbon capture, et cetera, over time. So that's what excites me. We are a technology company at heart. So there are many answers to this problem. Some of it is that we are going to have to innovate our way out of it. And, we want to push as hard as possible in doing that.
Our Bloomberg New Economy Forum is happening this year in Singapore, and the Asia-Pacific region is one of the fastest growing internet economies on the planet. Where do you see the most room, the most opportunity for Google to grow there?
It's such a fitting time frame. I'm glad you're focused on the region. It's the most vibrant region we see. It's our 20th year since we opened our office in Tokyo. It was the first office outside the Bay Area. You have 2.5 billion people on the internet. There are many areas in which they are leapfrogging trends which are here and embracing the future. Digital payments is a great example. So many of our products originated from APAC, Google Maps, Google Pay. A lot of our journey to bring computing to more people is playing out in Asia as well. I am excited about also the work we are doing through cloud, because the companies there are rapidly transforming themselves digitally. So a chance to provide that is something very exciting for us. So super dynamic region. I feel like we are learning as Google, being in the region. And so I think it'll transform. The first 10 years, I would have said we took products here and brought it to APAC. Over the past few years, we are beginning to build things there. And some of our future global products will be APAC first and rest of the world later.
You can't talk about APAC without talking about China, and you're facing stiff competition from Chinese tech giants there and beyond. What should U.S. policymakers know about competing with China?
You know, there's a lot of conversations about U.S. and China. The competition is fierce. When you look at areas like AI and quantum computing, where we are investing a lot, you know, Chinese companies are neck to neck. What I think about, you know, I was encouraged by the news coming out of Glasgow about the U.S.-China agreement on climate. To me, while we talk about all the areas where we are competing, some of the biggest areas which are common challenges for all of humanity. The pandemic was one. AI and AI safety over time will be a shared one. Obviously, sustainability is another area like that. So I think these are all areas in which the countries can come together. And so I think that's the way by which we think about, as, you know, when we compete on the internet, and there may be different visions of how the internet plays out. So I see opportunities both sides.
What are the chances that Google Search will ever come back to China, or that Google Cloud would ever come to China?
You know, today we don't provide most of our signed-in services in China, and I don't see that changing. But, you know, there are ways, as I said, in areas like AI or sustainability, I think there'll be opportunities for us to work together. Through cloud, we will support multinational companies which have presence everywhere, and so maybe there are opportunities to work that way as well.
AI is advancing at an astonishing rate, and it is hard to understand sometimes what this really means. In concrete terms, how will our lives look different, let's say 10 years from now, as a result of AI?
You know, done correctly, you know, in many ways, it's going to be helpful to you. You'll take it for granted. The same way today, for example, in India, over 1/3 of the queries on many phones come through voice. That is something people take for granted. You can do it. So over time, you'll expect to speak and be able to understand any language in the world. And, you know, those are all ways it's going to make it better. You may go to a doctor's office and go through a scan, and the system may be prioritizing for the radiologist so that they don't miss some important things, maybe giving them a second opinion. You know, so these are all ways in which it will seamlessly start playing a role, and I think we'll see the effects of that.
You mentioned if done correctly, and there are concerns. There are fears that AI will replicate the worst of society, even under Google's own roof, from your own researchers. What scares you most about AI? What keeps you up at night?
It's the most profound thing we are working on as humanity, and anytime you're developing technology, there is a dual side to it. I think the journey of humanity is harnessing the benefits while minimizing the downsides. The good thing with AI is it's both going to take time. I think I've seen more focus on the downsides early on than most other technology we've developed. So in some ways, I'm encouraged by how much concern there is. And you're right, even within Google, people think about it deeply. We publish a lot of research. I think it's more important that there are outside academic institutions, governments, nonprofits looking at this issue as well. So I think it'll be an issue which will have a lot of attention, which gives me a lot of comfort as well.
You said you'd pick up some new hobbies in the pandemic. What did you start?
Cooking pizza, just learning to cook, which I was never good at. I've gotten a little bit better.
Daybreak with Lee.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Daybreak Australia.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is Bloomberg Green.
On TV, radio, and the web, this is Bloomberg.
There's a big effort to have more African Americans and more women on boards, but do you think that will last?
I believe that we are seeing a real paradigm shift where we understand that diversity in the boardroom is more than one.
You have presided over Google through massive social movements that reverberated in and outside the company. What have you learned as CEO since the walkout?
For me, it was a moment. I think it changed the company for the better. We've always been committed. It gave us an insight on what more we could do. We undertook deep commitments, and the biggest, overall in diversity and inclusion, I think if you're committed and you actually put in the effort behind it, you can make a difference. Now we have stated clear goals. We are on track to meet those goals. But it forced us to think about new answers. So for example, tech companies used to talk about the pipeline problem, but we are now going to places where the talent is. We are working much harder. So going to Atlanta, going to DC, going to Chicago, going to New York, that's improving our diversity and representation at all levels.
The war for talent is even more competitive now in this new world. What are you offering? Elon Musk has said big tech is a place where talent goes to die. How do you respond to that?
Look, I look at the fact that we are looking to hire 30,000 people next year. I look at the impact we have on many people coming and working in the latest cutting edge things. And many people come in, people leave Google. We are proud of people who have left Google. I think there are over 2,000 companies that have been started by whom we call as Zooglers. I'm equally proud of that, right? I think we are one part of a big system, and I think I'm proud of the role we play in bringing in people and the impact they have over time in the outside world.
All right, that's most of the heavy stuff out of the way. We're going to do some rapid fire just to get to know you a little bit better. You said you'd pick up some new hobbies in the pandemic. What did you start?
Pizza, cooking pizza, just learning to cook, which I was never good at. I've gotten a little bit better.
Cricket or soccer/football?
Wow, it's tough. Both. Please don't make me choose.
Okay. Squid Game or Ted Lasso?
I watched both, though Ted Lasso is much more calming, and so I'd rather take Ted Lasso over Squid Games any day.
I know you're a voracious reader, so what's the last good book that you read?
I've been on a podcast binge, so a lot more podcasts than books nowadays.
Okay. Favorite videos you watch on YouTube with your kids?
A lot of music videos. This whole notion where creators are watching other things and commenting on it, it's a trend which my kids are really into, and I've kind of gotten used to it now. So, watching other games, etc. It's a phenomenon.
Screen time policy that's worked for you as a parent, and what's not worked?
I've kind of given agency to my kids. The only thing I tell them is that I can look at their digital well-being once in a while with them, and so.
How do you do that?
I ask them to show it to me, and they show it on their phone. So, so that's pretty much the only thing. So beyond that, it's agency and talking to them about it and making sure we are spending time doing other things.
And making sure they develop good habits,
That's
basically.
Right, yeah.
Metaverse or real world?
Done correctly, you shouldn't feel the need to make a choice. You always want to be present in the real world, and when you feel the need to do something, you want to do that. But I do think presence and the realness of the real world will end up mattering for humans for a long time.
Do you own any crypto?
I wish I did. I've dabbled in it, but in and out.
In and out, okay. Larry and Sergey, I'm not going to make you choose. How many times a week do you talk to them?
I talk to them regularly. It kind of ebbs and flows. And so there are times we get excited about something and we spend a lot of time talking it through, but it depends on, what I need.
A piece of advice you wish you had in your 20s and a piece of advice you wish you had in your 40s.
20s would be, being patient. I think when you're young, you're very impatient, which is a great thing. But sometimes you do amazing things by slowing down and being really focused and doing it over a period of time. And so I would advise the younger version of me to be more patient. Maybe at 40, I would say, when I look at climate, I want all of us to be impatient. So, I feel like when there's an urgency towards something, I think the world needs to be impatient. So that's the advice I would give to an older version of me.
How much do you personally wrestle with the decisions that you have to make? And how much longer do you see yourself being the CEO of Alphabet? Not just Alphabet, but also Google.
Yeah. On the first one, there are moments we all have to make tough decisions, and some decisions weigh on me. But it's a privilege to do it. I have very good people helping me think things through. So I think the combination makes it all, fine. On the second thing, I'm so energized by the things we need to do. I didn't have much access to computing growing up. It changed my life a lot. Mm-hmm. The one laptop per child goal really motivated me to come into technology. And when I look at last week, us launching an affordable smartphone in India, the chance to bring the next billion users in Asia and in Africa online, that gives me a lot of energy.
All right. Well, we'll be watching from afar. Sundar Pichai, thank you so much for joining us. It's
Thanks,
wonderful to have
pleasure
you
to be here.
However you get your
This
news.
is Bloomberg Daybreak with Lee.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Daybreak Australia.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is Bloomberg Green.
On TV, radio, and the web, this is Bloomberg.
When you think space, you probably think one space agency that travels under the radar is ESA, which is surprising considering what the European Space Agency has achieved and how vital it is to the global space industry.
We've collaborated with pretty much everybody who is involved in space exploration.
ESA wants to be a leading force in furthering humanity's mission into space.
Commander Ground, do you copy? Copy.
If we want to have successful human missions to Mars, we are going to have to learn to live and work off-world in a different way. And the place where we are going to learn to do that is on the moon.
Can ESA help humanity take its next giant leap?
This is a market that, over the past few weeks, has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
What would you like to achieve next in Saudi Arabia?
As you know, Barrick has invested in Saudi Arabia already in a partnership with Ma'aden, the state mining company. And we have an investment in the Jabal Sayed copper mine, one of the lowest cost, highest grade mines around, actually. And we have a real commitment to grow our footprint in Saudi Arabia with a particular focus on the Arabian Shield in partnership with Ma'aden. And so after tomorrow, I'm on the way to the mine. So not only how to be at the conference, but more importantly to go and work with our team out at the mine who've really done a great job managing the COVID crisis over the last 2 years.
Okay, so you built this, so this is all...
This is new since the pandemic. We assumed Googlers would want more indoor-outdoor options.
I mean, it's so exciting. It's such a fun job.
It is. But I would say the thing we're really excited about are these new buildings because we're building sustainability into everything we do. So really forward-looking.
Good? Yes. Okay.
From one of the newest workspaces at the Googleplex in Mountain View, California, this is Bloomberg Studio 1.0 with Alphabet CFO Ruth Porat. We're not far from her childhood home. Her father was a physicist at Stanford, her mother a psychologist. After graduating from Stanford herself and then earning a couple more advanced degrees, Porat landed her first job on Wall Street in 1987, where she would spend almost 3 decades, until Google's co-founders lured her to Silicon Valley.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
It's great to have you here at the Googleplex.
Thank you for having us. So we are at Google headquarters in Mountain View, and at this very same time, you are making massive investments in New York office real estate. You're expanding headcount in Atlanta and Chicago and Washington, D.C. What's the strategy behind all of this?
Well, at the core, we believe in hybrid work. So we do want to bring people back on campuses, but not full-time. We're thinking it'd probably be a 3-2 work week, but we think coming together is just such a core part of innovation, serendipity, culture, every element of it. And we're growing at a really rapid clip. So we are excited to be expanding our real estate footprint. And then we also wanted to make sure that we're meeting people where they want to be. And so enlarging the number of sites that we have available for people, in particular sites where you have great diverse populations.
Sundar just told me that Googlers will have this option to work in a hybrid mode forever, like literally forever. Obviously, you're embracing this massive cultural shift, but what are the risks? What do you worry about?
So the positive we've seen is there's a productivity uplift, we believe, in giving people the opportunity to be at home some of the time, not do the commute, be able to deal with everything else in their life, and coming into the office. So the risk is, I think about my career, and so much of the benefit in my career was the informal coaching, being brought into meetings, all of the touch points that you have. And so I think that one of the most important things for all of us as leaders is we need to evolve the way we lead. We need to make sure that we're thinking about this hybrid work life and why that's the way to be the best magnet for talent, and make sure that we're continuing to reinforce all of those great practices while opening up new great practices.
Speaking of your career, before you were CFO of Alphabet, you were CFO of Morgan Stanley, and you started your career on Wall Street in 1987. Talk to us about the journey of going from big banks to big tech. Why did you make that leap, and what impact did you want to have?
Well, I loved being at Morgan Stanley, and I became CFO the day James Gorman became CEO. He asked me to join him in that journey, and that was January 2010. And we were still recovering coming out of the financial crisis. There were still some pretty rocky days and a lot of decisions that needed to be made. And then I got to a point where I felt like we were in a great spot at Morgan Stanley, and obviously it's continued to do really well. And I just wanted that next chapter. My view in my career, I've always been focused on kind of continually learning, and I feel like when you hit a plateau, the right questions, what's my highest and best use? And it's been an extraordinary time.
You also survived Wall Street in the 80s and 90s, which is, notorious boys club. And Silicon Valley has sort of come to be known as a boys club of its own. How would you compare those two cultures?
Well, when I was starting my career many decades ago, it was tough and much worse than it is now, and it evolved, no question about it. Not where it needs to be, but certainly evolved, and I saw it through my career. I would say the biggest difference out here is the level of impatience, and I love it. It's the view is if you can do some of the extraordinary breakthroughs that we have out here, if you can do natural language translation, everything we do with AI, with VR, with self-driving cars, why can't you fix this now? And that level of impatience, I think, is fantastic.
Legend has it that when you got to Google, you were going to rein in the spending, tighten up on the moonshots. Your nickname, I believe, was Ruth Vader. Was that a tough job to take on?
So I think the narrative was written before I got here. Yeah. And what I find most interesting about that is I firmly believe the single most important thing in capital allocation is investing for long-term growth. I think if you don't, you are sowing the seeds of your long-term decline. And I learned that really early on in my career. Now, if you're investing in an industry like this and trying to do truly transformative things, by definition, everything can't succeed. And so by definition, you should have the metrics and data and milestones to assess, is it working or is it not? Because if everything's working, or if you think everything's working, I would say one of two things are wrong. Either you're not reaching high enough, or you're not being honest enough with yourself about the pace of breakthrough, whether you're going to get there. So to me, a really natural part, kind of the sister organization to investing for long-term growth is actually thinking about how are you doing with the risks that you're taking, stack rack them, and figure out what's at the bottom so you can redeploy those resources to the top. They go together, actually. And so I find the narrative, it's a false choice to think that it's either about growth or it's about pruning, stack ranking. They go together, and you have to think of them as actually empowering one another.
You advised the Treasury Department during the Great Recession. What lessons did you take away from that?
What struck me is a lot of the lessons from the financial crisis are relevant in good times and bad times. So the most important is it's easier to prevent than to fix. And so, that was really clear during the financial crisis. The financial crisis was about liquidity, and it dried up quickly. And it would have been really easy 6 to 12 months prior to build in durable liquidity. You couldn't do it in the moment. And so this notion about really building a solid foundation on which you operate, you need to do that ahead of time. It needs to be all of the work we do on trust and safety and content moderation, security. That is the foundation on which you can build everything else. Hank Paulson at one point said to me, you have to have the will and the means. And too often by the time you have the will, you no longer have the means. His comment was, be decisive, act early, even in the absence of information. I think that's true in this whole notion of investing for long-term growth. Because if you're not actually assessing progress along the way, and you just assume, we can keep investing in everything, at some point down the road, you'll say, I wish I had made those tough calls to double down on the things that really mattered.
What times are we in now? What's your read on the economy today, especially with rising inflation?
Well, I think back to March of 2020 and where we were. And I think of all of the intervention and steps that have been taken since then. And you've certainly seen the recovery coming out the back end. And it's been really gratifying from those painful days to see the breakthroughs that we've had, not just on the medical front, but we've also seen the improvement across businesses. I think one of the biggest concerns in particular is you're seeing us go through a digital transformation, and the acceleration of it is ensuring that everyone has the skills, the digital training and skills to thrive in this new economy.
Google now reaches more than half the people on the planet. Why shouldn't we view Google as a monopoly?
We often say that people come to Google not because they have to, but because they want to. It's really opening the world for so many people, so that's the intent.
I want to talk a little bit about regulation. You were drawn to M&A in your early days at Morgan Stanley. Microsoft is making some big acquisitions, deals that some think Google maybe would have wanted to win in a former life. Is antitrust scrutiny constraining any of your business plans and your ability to compete?
So the main thing that we've done throughout the life of Google is really invest in innovation, it's organic growth. And we're continuing to do that at a really rapid clip. We have then layered onto it tuck-in acquisitions and larger acquisitions, and we're continuing to be active, more in the smaller ones and the add-ons, to be fair. But we think there's a lot of opportunity still ahead of us, and so we're continuing to invest in partnerships and in some acquisitions, and do think that there's still upside in a lot of different areas.
So would you say this regulatory scrutiny isn't slowing you down?
It's really important for those of us in certain leadership positions to be very focused on constructively engaging and working with regulators on what are the issues, what is it they're trying to solve, and how can we constructively engage with them. At the same time, our engineers should focus on innovation and continuing to kind of up the bar on everything we're doing, address what is most helpful for our users.
Google is facing more serious legal threats at this time in the United States than the other big tech companies. How are those conversations with regulators going? And are they frustrating at this point?
Well, there's certain elements that are frustrating because I listened to the outline of some of the proposed legislation, and I think it's inconsistent with some of the priorities for public policy. So as an example, there's a lot of focus on what is called self-preferencing. Are you putting too many of your own products together? But during the pandemic, 1 in 3 small businesses said they would have failed without digital skills. Why? Because what they were able to do is connect with their users in different ways. So if you go search for a small business, you can then go to a map and you can get directed to the small business. That's a good thing. We have 6,000 small businesses who wrote in and said, you know what, we need these digital tools and skills. Same with a number of things on racial equity, a real surge in searches about where's a Black-owned business near me, and the ability to direct people through search and maps. So I think that what's really important, and that's why I said it's about constructive engagement, let's make sure we understand what they're trying to solve and work with them on what is it that we're trying to address through products so that the products are helpful in the ways that they want.
Facebook has taken a serious reputational hit. Has that had ripple effects or created collateral damage for Google?
Well, I think that whenever there's a backdrop that's challenging, it has ripple effects. But what we're really underscoring is all of the steps and investments that we are making to really protect the ecosystem the way our commitment to our users. So we know how sacrosanct that trust is, and it's all about privacy and what are the steps that we're taking to make privacy protected for our users. What is it that we're looking at to protect content and content moderations?
Google now reaches more than half the people on the planet. Why shouldn't we view Google as a monopoly?
So, you know, I go back to the earliest days when I first learned about Google back in 1998. And in those earliest days, when I heard about this like 8th search engine, the question is, why do you actually need it? And back at Morgan Stanley, I was working with our research analyst, Mary Meeker. She actually had her team put up white pages all around the conference room and was doing this comparison. What provided the most responsive results most rapidly? And all of a sudden you could see, well, wait a minute, this Google thing, actually, maybe we do need something new. And that's been the ethos at Google since inception, is just continued to innovate to make this an ever better experience for users. And so if we can deliver on that, which is what drives people here, it's really opening the world for so many people. So that's the intent.
Facebook and Twitter are exploring digital currency. What is your thought on the crypto market? And is there a play for Google?
So we look at it. There's nothing to comment on now. I think we're much more interested in blockchain and the underlying technology and the implications for the business and also for the way we can support our cloud customers. So certainly a lot of effort there.
There's considerable chatter in the crypto universe that Web3 and the blockchain could circumvent the power of Facebook and Google and more. what do you think about the next frontier of the internet?
At this point, I think there are a lot of different things ahead of us that are actually stunningly exciting that enable us to actually continue to address different needs and requirements. Like I look at, for example, in something like health, where I think blockchain will be very valuable when you think about health and health records. There are also a whole host of other areas where the data analytics that we provide are absolutely critical.
Should we make excuses to our employers? Should we tell our, like, if I have to head to a parent-teacher conference or take a kid to the doctor, do I tell my boss that?
You don't
or
tell
no?
your boss. You've got to get over the guilt.
I think that it's hard to put your head around any narrative. Let's just be honest. We've had sort of a shift in, are we in some sort of stagflation fears moment? People were talking about that all day yesterday.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
You survived breast cancer twice. What was your biggest fear at that time, and how did you overcome it?
Well, the biggest fear was I wouldn't make it. And I remember when someone at some interview while I was going through chemo said, "Where do you want to be in 5 years?" And I froze because it was, I want to be alive. And I learned a couple of really important things. One, given breakthroughs in medical technology, I learned to love the word manageable. This journey does become manageable, not for all cancers, but for many more cancers. And that gave me a lot of confidence talking with other survivors about it is manageable, get the best care, and just plow through it. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for all of the investments people have made over the years. But for anybody out there, and I think everybody sadly will be touched by cancer, either themselves or someone they know and love, many of these cancers are manageable, and just go at it with gusto. So that's what I did.
You're a mom of 3 sons, and I find that especially remarkable because I also have 3 sons. How have you managed that over the course of this, incredible career? How do you find that right mix of focus and free time to spend time with your family and doing the things that you love?
So my kids give me energy. They're remarkable. And I think one of the important things for me is this notion that you do have to have a mix. It's not about trying to find balance, the physics of which is really challenging. I think when people try for balance, they always feel they're failing on something because something's out of whack. So this metaphor that life is like a kaleidoscope, and you need to have different shaped pieces of glass and different color, and sometimes one is larger than the other. And what's beautiful about life is when it's constantly moving around. And so to me, that metaphor has actually been sort of an anchoring principle. The other is you have to put the kids first. So like they know that I'm there, when they need, always. And I think that just making sure that you're setting the boundaries the way you need to. I would say it's much easier today than when I was growing up in banking. And we had a cubicle, there was a computer room, you were anchored to the computer room. One of the many beautiful things about going through this evolution in work is understanding that hybrid works.
So how do we get rid of mom guilt, especially in this new work world? I want to shake my mom guilt. How do I do that?
Okay, so even when you feel it, just say, you know what, it's an investment in my career because I can stay in this longer and be operating at a higher level if I'm really getting the stimulus from all parts of my life. So you've got to drop the mom guilt. And when on the other side, mom guilt with kids, I think they get it. I think they understand what we're doing. And you know, I'll never forget during the financial crisis, at one point I was working on AIG. We went around the clock. I came home to shower that one, like right as we were landing AIG, and my 3 kids had each written me a yellow sticky note with a message on it. And one of them was basically, you know, the essence of which was, I get why you're doing this. And they saw it as the right thing for the country. I don't mean to over dramatize what it was, but that's what it felt like at the time. And that level of pride, I still have those 3 stickies right by my bedside because I get it. I get the mom guilt. I wish there were certain elements I could have done differently, but I also see the relationship we have and they understand what it means to actually be engaged in society and doing something you care about.
No mom guilt.
No mom guilt.
Thank you.
It's not allowed.
Thank you. Should we make excuses to our employers? Should we tell them, like, if I have to head to a parent-teacher conference or take a kid to the doctor, do I tell my boss that?
You don't tell
no?
your boss. You don't tell your boss. Guys don't tell their boss.
So what do we
And
say?
so I don't think you say anything. I actually made this point at an event at Morgan Stanley. I'm like, do not tell your boss. You've got to get over the guilt. The only way to move on from it is realize I'm a professional. I do things when I can, and it makes sense, and I get it all done. I just do it on my own timeline. And I actually had a woman who emailed me afterwards and said, I know you said I'm not supposed to tell my boss, so I won't, but I can't not tell somebody, so I'm going to email you. And I'm like, okay, that's step 1 of a 5-step journey. Do not tell your boss. Tell your boss, you know what, I need to do certain things for myself, and I feel guilty doing it, but I get everything done. There's no question. You are so beyond having to check in with people.
Well, thank you.
Do not.
We're in the middle of this so-called great resignation, and people are reflecting and changing and making big decisions. What's your advice to people in this, you know, big evolution, you know, huge choices ahead?
Well, I think you framed it really well. I don't think it's the great resignation. I think it's the great reshuffle, and people are reflecting on what do they want and how do they want to work and how do they want to live their life. So I think for all of us thinking about what does that mean for our institutions, it is about evolving the way we work, the way we interact, the expectations that we have to say, but I grew up in a cubicle on the 26th floor of a skyrise doesn't work anymore. And so what should we do as leaders? And I think that this generation appropriately, and it's very exciting, expects more from all of us. And so it's not just in how we work, but it is in what we do. And I think all elements of what's the mission, are you delivering on the mission is really important.
Okay, so a few rapid fire questions. Someone you'd love to have dinner with?
Well, I'd love to say my parents because they passed away a number of years ago.
Favorite family ritual?
We do this crazy thing that we've done for years, which is everybody gets to pick where we travel. We come up with the five different locations, and then we all vote, and then we get the grid, and that's where we go.
What's your favorite getaway?
Probably, I would say maybe Iceland was the best. That's an amazing one.
New York or California?
Ooh, so unfair. Well, sitting here outdoors right now and knowing I can do that for the rest of the year is pretty nice, but the energy from New York, so I'm not gonna, it's like I don't pick amongst children.
So in closing, Google's a massive company, multiple divisions, many bets. Where are you spending most of your time now?
I'm spending most of my time on your very important question about capital allocation, because if it really goes to this core point, you've got to invest for long-term growth and making sure that you're investing with the right intensity. I often say I don't want to get to the 2-yard line but not score. So you need to make sure you're investing with the right intensity to support long-term growth. That's the most important area where I would say I spend the bulk of my time. And then, of course, you have to prioritize in order to recycle to support those efforts.
What kind of discussions are you having with Larry and Sergey now about this next phase of Google?
So when they made the announcement about the role change, they were very serious about moving to this board role, and they're amazing board members. Sundar is, of course, relies on them and for counsel wherever, whenever. But most of the interaction is really around what are we doing at the board level. It's been great.
And you have your freedom to allocate capital as you like.
I work closely with Sundar and Philip and Thomas. But yes, we work as a great team.
So what's the vision for Google then, 10 years from now?
You know, it's fascinating I think I had the same reaction you did when I heard Sundar say search is the biggest moonshot. Yeah. And I think that continuing to find ways to be helpful to users to solve what they need where. So many people are coming online, and is video going to be the way they understand it's going to be about, search is going to be a different type of experience. So much of it's going to be about voice first and language translation. So it's going to continue to evolve.
And what about for you personally? Like where will it's been so amazing to hear about your journey, and I'm just curious about your personal growth, like what you feel you've accomplished in the last, since you've been here, and what you hope to accomplish.
I find that the opportunity to try new things and to invest in new things, and as we think about, well, what does that mean for each one of our areas, I think that intellectual curiosity keeps you young. And I think that continuing to learn is like your brain is like silly putty getting pulled in a lot of directions. So to me, it's continuous learning.
Ruth Porat, thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to be here.
Great to have you on
Thank
campus.
you.
Come back anytime.
Energy prices and a short supply of key chemicals that produce synthetic fertilisers are sending pig, cow and horse manure prices soaring. Even human waste is in demand as farmers hunt for alternatives. Fertiliser helps increase crop yields.
You can see how much moisture is held into this. It's a lot of organic material into the compost, so it breaks down. The manure and the straw breaks down into a friable mix that can be mixed into your soil in the ground and for growing a whole range of different vegetables. Holds the nutrients in, holds the water in, and it really increases the kind of biodynamic profile of the soil.
The recent price spike could mean more farmers going organic for the long term.
It's really a reminder, isn't it, just how sensitive the markets are to any commentary about trade. We did see some pressure on the yuan, we did see some pressure on the futures. That is now being reversed.
Do you think that electric vehicles could reach 10% of the American market by the end of this year?
That's difficult to say, like you said, because it'll be both, not only demand, based on the demand we are seeing for our vehicles, and the rest of the industry is seeing. It feels like the demand is certainly there. But the question will be how quickly can we, all of us, execute to build capacity to meet that demand. And that's what we are very busy doing. Within the next 24 months, we expect to get to about 600,000 battery electric units globally. And that's before our bigger investments that we're making in Kentucky and Tennessee, both for batteries as well as assembly, come online, because they don't come online until about 2025.
Bezos shocked the world when he stepped down as CEO of Amazon. Less shocking was his choice for successor. Andy Jassy was not only one of his longest tenured lieutenants, but the architect of Amazon's multi-billion-dollar cloud business, Amazon Web Services, a moonshot that helped transform Amazon into not just e-commerce, but enterprise juggernaut. Jassy then needed to find his own successor, tapping a former colleague who helped grow AWS in its earliest days, but had since left to run Seattle software giant Tableau. His job to continue the reinvention of AWS and, in turn, Amazon. Joining me on this edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0, new AWS CEO, Adam Selipsky.
You worked for AWS for 11 years and then went on to become CEO of Tableau Software in 2016. Then you get a call from Amazon to come back and run AWS as CEO. Tell me about that call.
Well, I was having a one-on-one at my prior company, and my Apple News alerts went off like everybody else's did, and it said Jeff Bezos is taking on a new role, and Andy Jassy is taking on the CEO role of Amazon. And of course, Andy and I worked shoulder to shoulder about 20 feet apart for 11 years, so of course I reached out and congratulated him, and we started talking, and the conversation turned to just some of the possibilities, and next thing I know, a little while later, here I am back at Amazon, absolutely delighted and honored to be the CEO of AWS and helping to shepherd this amazing business for our customers.
In that process, did you talk to Jeff as well?
Yeah, I had some communication, but it was principally with Andy, who of course was knew the AWS business best, and of course was taking on the CEO role. But yeah, there was contact, as you might expect, with a small handful of other people.
So what did Andy tell you he wanted in the next chapter for AWS?
Andy reminded me, not that I needed reminding, but that it is really still day one for AWS and for our customers. It is still so early in this business, and we shouldn't think that just because the business has grown rapidly, or just because we're currently the leader in the cloud, that it's anything close to mature. And so he really reminded me that we have to stay hungry, innovate as quickly as we ever have done in the past.
You're about half a year into the job.
Mm-hmm.
What changed while you were gone that surprised you?
Well, I think that so many more customers have really adopted the cloud and have really decided that they're going all in. So, I mean, it was a pretty decent-sized business when I left, but it's really grown, and the customer base has really expanded. And so now we have very deep relationships at the CEO level, the CIO level, across every country, every industry, every use case, and we're regularly interacting with the most senior people at our client organizations.
So you were working at Real Networks
Yes.
in the early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand you were offered a job at AWS without even really knowing what it was. I guess AWS was in stealth mode.
Well, it was very secret, so it was hard that the company didn't want to talk too much about it, but of course we had to talk a certain amount about it. So the call I got went something like, we have this initiative to turn the guts of Amazon inside out and expose it to other people. And it sounded intriguing, although I confess I didn't fully understand what that was all about. So I came in and started talking to Andy and a few of the other senior leaders, and eventually to Jeff. And I would have to say that even by the time I took the job, I thought I mostly understand what they're talking about, and it sounds like a good idea, and I'm in. But I also was like, well, we'll just have to see how it goes, and Amazon's a big place. And so I think we got a lot of intent to succeed here, and that's the thing that impressed me, was Amazon really had the desire and the intent and the belief that this could be a really good business.
AWS comes out of stealth mode and is the first to market with a cloud infrastructure service in 2006. How important was that first start, and do you think AWS still has an advantage today because of that?
I think the time to market advantage that we had, which was probably honestly 5 to 7 years head start before other companies really started to take this seriously, was an enormous. Frankly, it was just one of the biggest things that happened to us in the early years. Because at the beginning, a lot of people didn't get it. I would get asked a lot in 2006, so what does this have to do with selling books? And I even had a slide with kind of a pile of books on it and a question mark next to it. And the answer was, it has nothing to do with selling books, but the technology which enables us to sell books, being global, being at a massive scale, being secure, being low cost, being highly performant, all that technology has everything to do with offering these types of services externally.
Now, AWS isn't a scrappy startup anymore, and you do have big rivals, even though AWS is still the leader. Microsoft and Google are big rivals. How do you make sure that being big doesn't slow you down?
It's a great question, because we are currently the leader, and I mean, depending on which third party you look at, we're probably a little bit more than twice as big as number 2. And it's really important to continue to act as if we're insurgents, and to be insurgents, and not to start to act like incumbents. And I like to talk about actually managing the business. We want our senior leaders to be managing product and managing customers. And I think as you get bigger and you put more and more layers into your company, it's all too frequent that you start managing math. You start managing ratios and percentages and growth. And I think it's a real disease if you stray away from really focusing in a deep way on the product you're building and in a deep way on what your customers are telling you. And so we try and organize, both with our org structure as well as just with our culture and what we choose to focus on really making sure that everybody is thinking about one or both of those two things, product and customers. And if you keep even the most senior leaders engaged at that level, then all of a sudden you maintain the urgency and you keep acting like an insurgent. We got to feel that urgency every day.
So keep acting like an insurgent. That's the motto.
Absolutely, and structure yourself and build a culture that allows you to. It's one thing to say it, but it's easy to say it, but it's much harder to put in place the enabling mechanisms that enable you to do so. And we focus a lot of effort on those mechanisms.
Now, do you think the cloud keeps getting bigger and that AWS and Microsoft and Google just get bigger pieces of an ever-expanding pie? Or at some point, does it become a zero-sum game and that fight for market share becomes more brutal and more bloody?
Well, I mean, this is a very large market segment. If you look at global IT spend, it's in the trillions of dollars. I've seen estimates like $3 trillion. It doesn't really matter how many trillions it is. It's very, very large. And we've always believed that this was too good a market segment opportunity for there really to only be one winner. And sure enough, you've seen robust competition emerge, and we all compete vigorously. But the segment is just growing so rapidly that I think really for us, we believe that the winning business strategy for a long time to come, and I would maintain forever, is to focus not on the competitors, but to focus maniacally on customers and wake up every day understanding exactly what it is that they need us to build next, and then work backwards from there, back internally to how can we build those things. And if we do the best job at building the most quickly the things that are most important for our customers, then I'm really not worried about what the competitors will do.
You worked 10 feet away from Andy Jassy in the early days. Tell us something about the Amazon CEO that no one knows but you.
You're going to get me in trouble, aren't you?
Access the financial world on demand. Hear from leading economists, policymakers, and industry experts via live and on-demand webinars, only from Bloomberg. Start exploring to see what's moving the markets. Visit Bloomberg.com/webinars.
worked 10 feet away from Andy Jassy in the early days. Tell us something about the Amazon CEO that no one knows but you.
You're gonna get me in trouble, aren't you? I grew up in Seattle, and Andy, coming from New York, has this fascination I don't understand with New York sports teams. So I've had to endure that for a lot of years. New Yorkers, yeah. So what are you going to do? Although he's I think come to adopt some of the Seattle teams, particularly the new hockey team, the Kraken here.
As he should.
As he should, exactly.
So how do you expect Andy will be different from Jeff, or how has Andy already been different from Jeff?
Well, I think we're all different as leaders. I think it's all important that it's important that we all bring our own stamp to it and operate within ourselves. I don't think I would be a very good Andy. I don't want to presume, but I would assume that Andy wouldn't be a great Jeff, because Jeff's Jeff, Andy's Andy, and I'm me. So I think that Andy will certainly bring a great depth of experience from AWS, which is one important part of the business, and having operated that business for so long, and I expect that'll also give him an opportunity, although he was involved in other parts of Amazon certainly for a number of years. We'll be able to bring a fresh perspective to the whole company, just as I hope to bring to AWS. And I think that fresh perspective is often helpful. I think just the mere act of change is useful for the business, for customers, for employees, and just to shake things up a little bit. So I think just a fresh perspective.
How will you be different from Andy?
Well, I think that the world around us is changing so much that we're going to have to be different. It doesn't matter what we did yesterday. And right after I joined, we actually added 2 new leadership principles, which is very exciting. One's around striving to be Earth's best employer, and the second around focusing on the fact that success and scale bring broad responsibility. And those are things about which I personally am very passionate. And so I really personally look forward to digging in and helping the company to figure out what are those things that we have to figure out. Where can we innovate to be Earth's best employer? And then also to figure out externally, what can we do to really be great citizens of our local communities, to be great citizens of our national communities, and to be great citizens of the global community. And I care a lot about those things, as a lot of other people do here, but I plan to put a good amount of energy and time and focus and hopefully help Amazon innovate in all of those areas.
How closely do you work with Andy day to day? Does he, regularly weigh in on AWS decisions or not?
Well, he's got a pretty broad scope of things to worry about now, so he's got a pretty intense day job, I believe. So he's really focused across the company, as you would expect him to be. But that being said, obviously AWS remains an important part of Amazon, and so we touch base regularly, be it in person or via email, just on the most important things going on in the business.
Does Jeff ever weigh in on AWS decisions?
Yes, I mean, really from the beginning. Jeff was involved at the very, very beginning at some of the most fundamental decisions. How do you price EC2? What do you name S3? What does the detail page look like? Obviously, over time, the business grew, and but Jeff was always available when we needed him, and I certainly anticipate that'll be the same going forward.
So is he still available now? And what do you understand that Jeff's priorities are?
Sure. Well, I'll let Jeff speak to his own priorities, but certainly Jeff has been available when, for example, we've been doing our annual planning cycle, as many companies have, and it's been great to have Jeff weigh in on really where we're heading for the next year and beyond, and to just make sure it's easy to get focused on the details of the business, and it's great to have multiple people who can help you pick your eyes up a little bit.
Now, you joined AWS in the middle of a pandemic. You came back to AWS in the middle of a pandemic. That's hopefully moving into the rearview mirror. Moderna is one of AWS's biggest customers. If it weren't for the cloud, if it weren't for AWS, would we have had a vaccine as quickly as we did?
I've got to tell you, Emily, it's been an absolute privilege for us to work with Moderna, because what they're doing obviously is literally life-saving, and they've been so innovative and so creative. So Moderna took a drug development process to get to a vaccine candidate. That process would typically have taken them 20 months. And doing that on AWS in conjunction with all the innovation on their side reduced that 20 months to 42 days. 42 days to get the vaccine candidate, the mRNA vaccine candidate for COVID-19. And that was really running multiple parts of Moderna on AWS. So if you look at the drug design part, they had their drug design studio running on AWS, all the way to manufacturing with the new digitized manufacturing that they call their digital manufacturing platform. So it's really end-to-end, and the ability to use massive amounts of resources and to pick the exact type of service and capability for each part of the job, and to really bring the full set of resources to bear, in addition to not having to focus on the IT and the infrastructure and the technology, and rather letting Moderna focus on the all-important job of drug discovery. So working in partnership, it was just magnificent to see what they accomplished.
Since you joined AWS, a number of longtime AWS leaders have moved on to Microsoft, to Stripe, to Tableau. Does that concern you?
Well, actually, retention has been very good. If you mentioned the senior leaders, if you look at the VP plus ranks, the VP and above ranks at Amazon, the average tenure is over a decade, over 10 years. So that's actually very, very strong retention. So of course, you're always going to have some level of people coming and people going, and at the end of the day, that's actually healthy for the business. You want new perspectives to come in, of course, in the right proportion.
Amazon has opened an investigation after 550 employees supported a petition claiming a culture of discrimination, harassment, bullying, and bias. What's the status of this?
Well, we are incredibly focused, and I personally believe it's incredibly important to really have a very diverse, inclusive and equitable environment. And we're going to make sure that whatever it takes, that we've got that. So we believe that we're really doing a lot of things to deliver on that. And we've got a lot of innovative efforts around bringing in a diverse workforce, which we have to have, both because we're going to serve our customers best. They're diverse. We have to match that diversity. And also, I just believe it's our responsibility, and it's the right thing to do. Yeah, anytime there is any possibility that things are not, something has not gone the way we wanted to, we're going to investigate it thoroughly. That's what we're in the middle of doing in this case, and we'll make sure that we're operating in a way that's consistent with our values, and that's always the only goal.
If you could rewind to the early 2000s, the earliest days of AWS, is there anything you would have done differently to build an inclusive culture, to start with a more inclusive culture, to make sure that it didn't become a boys' club?
Well, I don't think that's what we have. I think that we do have a really fun, exciting, innovation-led, and inclusive culture. And that being said, these are hard problems. I think we've done a lot, but we are nowhere close to where we need to be. We're going to be restless and dissatisfied with our progress on DE&I, just as we are with every other part of our business.
Mark Zuckerberg is making a big bet on the metaverse. How big do you think it's going to be?
It's such an interesting sentence. The metaverse is real.
Daybreak with Lee.
On Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to Daybreak Australia.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is Bloomberg Green.
On TV, radio, and the web, this is Bloomberg.
AWS has the biggest trove of sensitive corporate data in the world. I'm curious how you think about the balance between data and privacy and freedom and civil liberties in the modern era. I mean, there are governments, there are nation states around the world that want that information. Hackers and criminals want that information.
Well, we're very clear to start with that our first job is security. We often say security is job zero. It was on the first page of our operating plan pretty much every year that I can remember.
But what about when governments request that information?
So,
subpoena that information?
Sure. Well, we are very clear that our customers' data is their data. So the data belongs to our customers, and not everybody operates that way. We are not going to look at customers' data. We are not going to compete against our customers using their data. Their data is their data. And furthermore, we have all sorts of architectural best practices that our customers should be and are using for any sensitive data. And so a lot of that really relies around encryption. And so we've built a lot of different encryption capabilities so that any sensitive data, which could leak for any reason, be it to a government, be it to a hacker, be it to anyone else, any form of security breach, that it's encrypted and useless to anybody else. Given the broad array of encryption solutions that we provide, it's actually very doable and powerful for our customers to safeguard their data that way.
Mark Zuckerberg is making a big bet on the metaverse. Is AWS going to have a role in the metaverse?
I think AWS already has a big role in the metaverse. So I think the cloud enables the metaverse. So if you think about all of the compute capacity, all of the storage, all of the machine learning which is required to create compelling and delightful end user experiences in the metaverse, a lot of that is already today running on AWS. So if you take Epic Games, for example, so Epic runs Fortnite, massively popular game, 350 million users worldwide, and Epic runs almost everything on AWS, from the back-end servers to the analytics and everything in between. So I think that's a great example of the metaverse at work, and all that's happening today on AWS. And we anticipate that's only going to grow really rapidly in the future.
How big do you think it's going to be?
It's such an interesting sentence. The metaverse is real, and yet it's virtual at the same time. I think that if we continue to do what we've always done, which is to provide a technology platform that allows organizations to transform, then these gaming and entertainment and social media and other companies will be able to do what they do best, which is to focus on innovating on behalf of their end users. And I think that the metaverse and many other areas will be rich with inventions.
So this next conversation will happen in the spheres, in the metaverse. That's where we'll next meet. How about that?
That could be. I'll meet you in the metaverse.
All right, see you there. Now, I know that climate change, and stopping climate change, and your data center footprint is a big passion of yours. How fast will Amazon's data centers get to carbon neutral?
Amazon is already the largest purchaser of renewable energy in the world. And we intend to be 100% renewable energy by the year 2025. We had originally said 2030. We actually accelerated that by 5 years to 2025. And that's part of our broader climate pledge that Amazon created, and to which we've now gotten 200 other organizations to sign on to. And the climate pledge is to be net zero carbon by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Accord target. Yeah. So we know how to do some of that. Other part are going to require invention, but we really look forward to it, and I think it's one of the most important things we can do for our generation.
Amazon counts some of the biggest oil and gas producers as its customers. Isn't that a contradiction? Should you be kicking them off your platforms? Those customers are trying to get to sustainable business models which rely on new energy sources. And so many of those customers are figuring out how do they get to wind, how do they get to solar, how do they get into batteries, all new business models relying on renewable energy. And I think rather than abandoning them and having them maybe dig in more on fossil fuels, if we can enable them to move faster, to be more innovative, and to be more agile in figuring out new business models, new technical solutions, experimenting, failing fast, and moving on to the next idea,
then the whole world will get to the renewable energy solutions that we need.
At this year's reInvent conference, it'll be the first time that Andy Jassy is not giving the keynote. You will be. Give us a preview. What can we expect to hear?
I think we're going to have a lot of really exciting announcements. So I think across our service portfolio, you'll see that. We have a lot of exciting partner announcements. The partner ecosystem still remains, to this day, so important to what AWS is doing, and we have some great announcements lined up for that. And then I think people are going to want to see that we're making it easier and easier for them to consume the cloud and to work with AWS. And so we're going to continue to, in addition to building more powerful basic capabilities, we're going to continue to make it easier and easier in a variety of ways to interact with AWS.
Adam Selipsky, CEO of AWS, thank you so much for joining us.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
The Delhi airport, and behind me you can see SpiceJet 737 MAX aircraft. SpiceJet chairman Ajay Singh earlier today said that Boeing is going to compensate SpiceJet in form of cash and aircraft. Celebration happening at the Gwalior airport. As you can see, they've literally rolled down the red carpet for SpiceJet chairman Ajay Singh. There are balloons, there are flowers. This is a big deal for SpiceJet because it is the only Indian operator of Boeing 737 MAX planes currently.
This is a market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
Mentioned the 1.5 million tests. That's quite a feat. At the same time, I've seen estimates that say that'll get you through about a week or so. What do you do after that?
Let's be smart with our resources. Why not use the tests strategically when you need them? How are we using them? A child is diagnosed with COVID in a classroom. We give that entire classroom take-home test kits so their parents can test them, so we can determine if we should close down the school or just the classroom, or what we should do with that particular facility area. What has happened in the past, you had one diagnosis, we want to close the entire school. That just makes no sense. Instead of using our resources in a strategic fashion, the science has shown just because one child has COVID in the classroom, it doesn't mean the entire school or the classroom is infected. We're going to be smarter, and we're going to pivot, and most importantly, we're going to defeat COVID.
I think it's still a pretty good time for real estate. Texas and Florida are well positioned. You should stay away from buggy whip businesses.
John Gray went from aspiring journalist to become one of the top real estate investors in the world.
When I met my wife in English class, I showed up wearing a suit and tie. Everyone else was in Birkenstocks. It was clear I'd made a decision which path I was on.
John joined Blackstone in 1992 and was the second employee in its real estate division.
I say to my kids all the time, luck is a core competency.
But it wasn't all luck.
I've had the opportunity to know John and work with John since I think his second day at Blackstone, when he had just gotten, out of Penn. While I think to a degree luck is, involved in anybody's success, I think with John, it's a gross overstatement. I think it is just simply raw talent.
By 2005, John was running Blackstone's real estate unit and spent the next 13 years building it into a behemoth with about $119 billion of assets.
I think he has a very unique ability to combine tremendous amount of vision and understanding trends, generally ahead of a lot of other people, and conviction. And he turns that conviction, unlike few people I have seen, into very bold, big moves that have generally paid off.
What put John on the map was Blackstone's $26 billion deal to buy Hilton on the eve of the financial crisis.
So there were a lot of things going really, really wrong. I'd say John's leadership throughout was what I would describe as sort of a steady hand on the wheel.
The Hilton deal ultimately became one of the most successful private equity investments of all time, reaping more than $14 billion in profits and catapulting John to the #2 job at Blackstone.
John's sort of the natural. He's just got it all.
Seems that journalism's loss has become private equity's gain. When you were growing up in the Chicago area, did you say, one day I want to be the greatest real estate investor in the world?
No. I got here as an accident. I had grown up in suburban Chicago. I'd never really been to the East Coast prior to going to college. And when I got to college, I decided that I really wanted to be an English major. I wanted to be a journalist, is what I thought. I wrote for the Daily Pennsylvanian. And about a year into school, I realized a bunch of my friends, fraternity brothers, liked business. They were in Wharton, and I owned a few stocks. I liked numbers, so I decided to get a dual degree. And that was really important for me because my senior year in college, I met a young woman who was an English major also. And a few weeks later, I got a job working for a small investment and advisory firm. And that was about 30 years ago. And that was Blackstone, and that was my wife, Mindy. So that really set me off. And so I went from Philadelphia, I came to New York, and I started.
People have moved to Florida and, let's say, Texas, maybe for warm weather, maybe because their states don't have income taxes. Do you think that trend will continue, and is that a good place to invest in real estate now because more people are moving there?
I would say it's a bit of both. I think the weather, the lower cost of living, lower taxes, particularly in a post-SALT world, concerns about quality of life, crime. I think the migration has, Texas is one of the fastest growing states in the country, even though it's enormous. I think that will continue, and it was accelerated a bit by the pandemic. On the other hand, New York City, San Francisco, these are amazing places. And when you think about technology and innovation, entrepreneurship, immigrants, people are going to come to these cities. My daughter's graduating from college. They want to live here. So I think there will be a rediscovery of these cities. But I think longer term, the policymakers in these cities can have a big impact. We saw it, obviously, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when these cities suffered. I don't believe that's what's going to happen. And I think with the right policy, I think these cities can really thrive. But yes, Texas and Florida are well positioned.
So when you were growing up, and certainly when I was growing up, I'm older than you, people really wanted to own their own house. It was part of the American dream, own your own house. But you've been buying a lot of rental housing now. Is that because you think young adults are not as interested in buying their own home and they want to rent now?
No, I mean, there could be some of that. But if you look in the last 12 months during COVID, there's been a surge in people wanting to own homes. I think our investment, or I know our investment in rental housing, is based on the fact that we just haven't built a lot of housing since 08, 09. So we've averaged